the main character experienced betrayal from the man she trusted the most. She gave Fabian everything, all of herself, to the last. And in response, all she received was that he abandoned her in a cold dungeon. She sincerely believed that she would no longer be alone. It seemed that she would be able to stay by his side, because he was the only man she could rely on, and also the main character of this game world. Fabian Ignis is a tall, handsome guy with fiery red hair. One day, he approached her and said that her magic had been very useful. The main character's name was June Carentia. The girl replied that with her support magic, she could only help from afar. But Fabian assured her that there was no need to worry about that. He said that their meeting was a real stroke of luck and looked at her with a slight smile. This confused June, who felt surprised and a little nervous. Fabian added that he couldn't imagine the expedition without her. He sincerely hoped that she would help him in the battle with the Demon King and will remain with him until the very end. She replied that, of course, she would be there because she liked being with him. She promised to be his strength. That's what she always said. But now she couldn't believe that he really wouldn't come to save her. There was no one else to rely on. June was left here alone. Fabian knew what situation she would find herself in, and he still left her. She didn't understand why it was necessary to give up hope if it could be so easily abandoned later. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard, and June turned around and saw a monster. The monster was several times larger than her. She didn't know what to do. The expedition had no problems with such enemies, but for a support mage, this was an impossible task. She simply didn't have the strength to defeat him, so she decided to run away. But the monster turned out to be too strong and huge. It hit her with its hand, and she fell. She wanted him to leave her alone with all her might and threw a stone at him. The monster was even taken aback for a moment by the fact that she tried to engage in battle with him. Then June realized that the enhancement had not worked on the stone, and it had not even left a scratch. Sadness overwhelmed her again, and she remembered Fabian. She felt especially sad because she even sacrificed her hand for him. She sincerely hoped that he would still appear and save her. Suddenly, she noticed that something strange had happened to the monster. At first, she thought it was Fabian who had come. A gentleman approached her and remarked that it was rather strange. After all, in this dungeon there was a man who was not able to cope with a Balrog. June didn't understand who he was, and was scared. In fact, the leader of the Dark Knights, Meyer Knox, stood before her. She began to explain that the villagers forced her to come here. The Lord said that this was similar to human sacrifice. Some still have not abandoned such customs. She couldn't even imagine that she would meet him here. He said she was incredibly lucky to have stumbled upon him. June survived, but it was too early to relax. Before, she would have believed in luck, but now she truly understood this world. It certainly wasn't luck. The leader simply suggested waiting for the others. She couldn't believe that Meyer Knox would become a true demon king and fill the world with nothing but monsters. But this leader decided that perhaps he should tame this monster himself. He also noted that not dying from the first attack of such a monster was too much. Since he was here, she decided to at least try using magic. The gentleman who turned around realized that it was a strengthening spell. With her magical support, he still managed to defeat the monster. After that, he approached the girl and said that he now understood how unusual she was. He took her hand, which made her very embarrassed. She wasn't supposed to show her powers, but it had become a habit. The gentleman said that being abandoned without support and help is really scary. She apologized and suggested that they just forget about it. She said that he didn't really need help. He tried to explain something to her, but she didn't understand him at all. He asked if she would like to join his expedition. He told her to become his, but the girl could not understand what this unexpected turn of events was. Maybe she just received an offer from the final boss himself? The atmosphere in their camp remained tense and oppressive. June didn't know what to do now. She didn't even understand how she ended up next to Mayer, although she was with those who knew her. He said he would ask June again. He asked again if she wanted to join the Dark Knights expedition. June wanted to refuse immediately, but she didn't know how he might react. So she simply thanked him for the offer and asked if he could give her a little time to think about it. But Meyer didn't understand at all why she was hesitating, because the Dark Knights were the best choice. He was indeed right, and she knew it perfectly well. The Dark Knight squad is commanded by the strongest warrior, Archduke Knox. This is the best expedition group that everyone envies. But she didn't want to join them. Anyone else would have done the same in her place if they knew who he really was. Mayor Knox was more than just a strong man. She found herself in the world of the game The Great Battle of the Holy Devil, and June Carentia is a character from it. The dreaded Duke Knox was also one of the playable characters. And Fabian, who left her, was the main character, who the player himself had to play as. She learned a lot while gathering information about this game, including the fact that the game has a second round. The fake Demon King, cornered in the first round, used a hidden core to reverse time. Thus, for the player, the second round, a repeat playthrough, began. In the second round, Meyer tried to kill the Demon King to get rid of the curse in his blood. And when the king dies, there's a sudden twist. Meyer was the hidden core. He absorbs the fake's power and becomes the true Demon King. The battle with the awakened Knox became the true finale of the game. It would be crazy to become his subordinate, given all this. Especially since it's the second round now, he'll soon turn into a monster. Mr. Mayer said he didn't understand why they were whining. There was no better expedition group to find, and no one needed support mages anymore. The girl, of course, agreed that he was right. But that didn't mean she had to choose only this demon. She needed to somehow get rid of him, so she thought about it. She decided to let herself be humiliated to convince him otherwise, and said that she was very grateful that he had saved her. True, even in terms of magic support she wasn't very good, so she wouldn't be of much use. But the gentleman said that he didn't think so, and the lady remarked that she was simply lucky. Then Mayer admitted that he had indeed been a bit hasty. The lady smiled and thanked him for understanding her. She felt it worked, but the gentleman immediately said he had come up with another outcome. He stated that he wanted to test her skills and then return to the conversation. The girl didn't understand at all what was being discussed. He brought her here again, which made her worry. Mayer told June to stay here, because if she was in no hurry to get out, he would have to do it himself. The girl could not understand how it could be cozy in the dungeon. She really wanted to escape from here. It was full of unpleasant things. From the bench, she saw that he was indeed leaving. He would recognize her skill if she used magic, but there was no choice. She needed to escape from here, so she used magic anyway. Then, turning around, he saw that she had managed to escape with her help. She came up to him, and he was surprised that she was also quick. It wasn't that bad, both the skills and the movement were fine. He turned to her and said that she was the one he needed. The girl realized that she was really in trouble. It was just a game mechanic. Stat points and skills carried over from the first playthrough. So she stood out a little, but didn't want to join the Dark Knight. The gentleman did not understand why she was so afraid and why she resisted so fiercely. Perhaps she had chosen another expedition. The girl replied that this was not true. After all, this was the first one she had met. Mayer was better off not knowing. But when he heard that this was her first expedition, he smiled. He asked again if she really still felt affection for Fabian. The girl was very scared and did not understand how he even knew about Fabian. She began to worry, realizing that perhaps he could penetrate other people's minds. June replied that this was not true, and then asked what exactly he was talking about. Mayor Knox calmly stated that he did not like to waste time, so he suggested getting straight to the point of the conversation. It seems he already knows that she still has memories of the first playthrough. This caused June to ask how he knew who had passed first. Mayer asked with interest what the first round meant. He found this extremely curious. He believed she was calling this current passage her second. June had accidentally used a game term, and judging by her behavior, he concluded that she really did remember everything. June was stunned, and he added that she had better not try to deceive him. Even a child could have done it more convincingly. June wasn't such a bad actress, and this upset her. But Knox decided to add something. He said that she was not the only one who retained memories. He said he noticed her strange behavior from the very beginning. It seems Fabian Ignis also remembers the first round. June was truly shocked that Mayer knew about this too. She looked at him and realized he was picking things up too quickly. Perhaps it was a characteristic of the final boss. He looked at June and admitted that at first he thought he had gone crazy, all because what was happening began to repeat itself over and over again. In a world where everything went in circles, a man appeared who began to act differently. He was informed that the next target of the expedition had already been determined. That man turned out to be Fabian Ignis. He knew June was stuck in the dungeon and in danger. But despite this, he chose another place for his expedition. So June realized that there was no point in hoping for him. She was overcome with fear because all this turned out to be true. She remembered how some girl screamed in panic, not knowing what to do. After all, the blow was so strong that it almost tore off Fabian's arm. It was necessary to help urgently, but holy magic did not work. Then June made up her mind. She would sacrifice her hand to save Fabian. The doctor was glad when she saw that everything was okay with his hand. Fabian realized it was June's magic and thanked her. He looked at the girl and noticed that she was holding her hand. He rushed to her and asked again if she had really transferred the wound to herself. But June just quietly thought that she was okay and asked if she could hear him. She didn't regret anything because now they both could survive. Her arm had already recovered in the second round, so everything was fine. But the sacrifice was in vain because he had originally planned to go to another dungeon for the Ring of Flame. This is exactly what she told Mayer. He remarked that if she understood everything so clearly, then why was she still relying on him? Nox believed June simply wanted to stay with Ignis's pet. She noted with surprise that he even knew the nickname. But June couldn't have imagined that he'd remembered every detail of the first playthrough, although there are some things he still doesn't understand. Fabian's betrayal has nothing to do with her refusal to join the Dark Knight, and even if he's a bad person, he's still the main hero of this world. And Mayer is just the final boss she must destroy. The man sat down next to her and asked her to share, assuring her that he was ready to listen. June replied that she couldn't go that far, but Mayer assured her that everything would be fine. She was the one he needed. He came to this dungeon to save her. When June realized that his presence here was no accident, it stunned her. Mayer noted that the conversation about the first round has already taken place. Now it's time to choose. He made it clear that she had to make a decision. But June admitted that she didn't quite understand why he was so firm in his intentions. Mayer replied that the reason was that he needed her specifically. He intends to get her at any cost. He wants to destroy the Demon King, maybe that's the point. June wanted to know what his real reason was. She tried to understand his true intention, but Mayer didn't seem to understand what she meant. The girl recalled that she remembered the first round, and now he says that it was all because of her outstanding abilities. Mayer admitted that this was indeed the case, but June objected. She had no abilities at the time, and he had already decided to save her. The man closed his eyes and said that it seemed to him, no, he was sure, that she was much more valuable than she thought. June didn't quite understand what that was supposed to mean. Even Fabian, with whom she spent so much time, abandoned her. So she couldn't understand where Mayer got such confidence from. She thought he didn't know everything she did in the first round, and I even hoped that he didn't know it. Doesn't know that she tried to kill him, although she did not rule out that Mayer knew about this. Usually, the real Demon King is killed in the second round, but she decided to do it in the first one. Perhaps she was simply afraid of the coming battle. That's why she tried to destroy the hidden core. Mayer Nox himself. Information about a high-level dungeon that Nox couldn't miss quickly reached the Dark Knight's ears. There were too many gaps in all of this, and in the end, it all turned out to be in vain. Everyone blessed the Dark Knights. Mayer Nox guarded a high-level dungeon. One thing after another, Jun eventually had to give up on killing him. A support mage has no chance against an attacker type, especially one that can't be penetrated even in dungeons. Therefore, it is unlikely that he fully understood her plan. Even if he had understood, Mayer could have cut out her entire group at the very beginning. Or he simply wouldn't have saved her in the second round. When he turned to June, she flinched because she was lost in her thoughts. He told her to forget about Fabian. He was doomed as a hero if he lost such loyal allies as Canyon from the start. It was simply terrible. Mayer's gaze was as if he hadn't guessed anything. But it was precisely because of him that Fabian would fail. The Demon King would already be dead if not for the hidden core. He simply noted that he wanted to convey a simple idea. It was not her fault, only Fabian was to blame. She will surely understand this soon. The Demon King Fabian will not be defeated. Not this time. June knew he was right. It was clear Mayer would win. But what's the point if the real king is hiding somewhere? She can't understand why she should serve the future Demon Lord. It would be better to ask Fabian to accept her back into the group. She has pride, but Fabian also means a lot to her. He is still the protagonist, and only he has a chance to kill the Demon King. This means that only with him is a happy future possible. A future with Mayer is shrouded in darkness, and the price of a slim chance could be abandoning the safe path. Therefore, she does not understand at all how to get out of this hopeless situation. Mayer has better stats, and that excuse won't work, especially when it comes to attacking power. Then only holy power remains. Mayer is in some way connected to the Demon King. That's why normal attacks don't work on him unless the king is weakened to a certain level. Nox, like the demon, has the darkness attribute. The Dark Knight's main attack power is the Archduke, but because of this, even 100 hits can cause almost no damage. Only when Fabian's group weakens the king will Mayer's attacks be effective. And she's being offered the chance to deal with him using only Mayer's powers. Unless the attribute of darkness suddenly becomes holy. At that moment, she remembered her transformation skill. It really could temporarily reverse an attribute, and it might work. Almost all the monsters in this world, except for a few in special dungeons, are dark attribute. Therefore, the transformation skill is usually not used. But in Mayer's case, it's a different story. He could even help defeat the Demon King. Fabian, believing he had gotten all the information he needed from her, simply disposed of her. Although, she only spoke about the first round, where she fought alongside him. The strategies she proposed were based on the protagonist's characteristics and player observations. But he doesn't know anything about special items or dungeons. Fabian, who threw her, will not cope with the second round. Almost certainly. So June said she had one request. The future of this world cannot be left in the hands of Ignis. June really needs to think about what she can do for the real June. She never understood how she ended up in this girl's body. She didn't want this, and therefore she sincerely regretted it. Perhaps it came at the cost of her own life. That's why she was so worried and determined to fulfill any of her wishes. For example, to live her life the way June herself would have lived it. But in the end, I could only come up with one way. To live in the shadow of the main character, as befits a support mage. To be his protector. The woman from the past started yelling at her about what she was doing and said that she shouldn't interfere. But June wanted to keep her character's name in the story. This is the only thing that the one who stole this body can do, and at the same time, it is atonement and retribution. June Carentia's name must be recorded in history. After these words, the man laughed. He was surprised because he couldn't even imagine who would have thought that June was so greedy. It probably looked stupid on his part, but he still agreed and said that her name would be on everyone's lips for a long time, and he would take care of it himself. After all, a participant in the raid on the Demon King is unlikely to be forgotten quickly. Now, June had no reason to refuse. She smiled and realized that this was her only chance in life. She had to survive to the very end to see a world where everyone would be happy. So the girl said she agreed to join the Dark Knight. Mayer Nox smiled. After all, she'd been thinking about it for so long. He promised that he would do everything possible to ensure that she did not regret her decision. He added that he certainly wouldn't be disappointed in her because he wanted to express his gratitude for her courage. If she needed help, of any kind, she could come to him anytime. June laughed and said that she was not some high-born person to receive such treatment. But Mayer Nox turned to her and reminded her that he had promised to treat her better than everyone else. So he suggested they return to base immediately and discuss the raid on the Demon King. June was surprised that she wouldn't be given time to adapt, but Mayer said he believed in her strength and was sure she could handle it. The girl noted that she was abandoned in the second round. Only stupid Fabian is to blame for this. That's exactly what Mayer said. June didn't think she would ever scold Fabian along with Mayer, but she smiled anyway. She admitted that Mayer was indeed a fool, but she wouldn't regret her choice. Then Mayer told everyone that this was June Carentia, and from now on she was part of the Dark Knight. He turned to June, who greeted everyone, introducing herself as a support mage. She hoped that she would be able to get along with everyone. Everyone looked puzzled, as expected, but their reaction was understandable. After this, Mayer turned to Axion, who immediately approached. June was very surprised because she saw a familiar face in front of her. The level of magical power could be understood even just by the color of the hair. It was the ace of the Dark Knights, a fire mage named Axion Flam. Mayer said that now he and June would share life and death as colleagues, and he would have to take care of her. But the guy didn't understand why they turned to him, because he was an attack mage. Then the gentleman said that June Carentia was very talented, so she would be appointed as her daughter's vice captain. June was simply horrified. She did not understand why this was so, and asked him again how she should understand it. The gentleman noted that he had said that she would receive better treatment. She thought she'd be given the kind of relationship befitting a captain, but not a real position. It was odd, but the other man was happy about it. But June behaves this way, the lady noted, that she simply understands her limits. That way she would definitely get into all the history books, so that's what I did. But then he added that if she didn't want it, he would appoint someone else as captain. But June immediately and abruptly agreed. Everyone was shocked that she'd been given such a high title for her multi-talented support. Perhaps she has talents they haven't yet discovered. She could say whatever she wanted, but she hadn't expected Mayer to listen to her from the very beginning. He also asked Axion to explain everything to her before he returned. He turned to June and said that he would go to get the results of the dungeon exploration, and if she has any questions, she can ask Axion. June, of course, agreed, but Axion himself did not understand what was happening. He decided to just keep quiet and remarked that it was the first time he had seen him like this. June was surprised, and the guy noticed that she took his hand, and he didn't say a word. The lady didn't understand what was wrong with that, but Axion said that usually he would have looked at her with disdain and pushed her away. And this time he even smiled. He never personally brought people into the group. You need to try to look at everything from a different perspective. Attack time will be reduced by 2/3, so even a simple soldier has a clear advantage under the influence of this magic circle. June approached him and he apologized because this rarely happens and he was a little nervous. June said she wanted to make it clear right away. She had not asked to join their expedition. He invited her himself, and she wants to tell him about it. Then the guy smiled and said that he already understood and apologized if he was rude to her. He seems to regret what he said about the dungeon. This isn't the first time they've seen each other, and they had a rather unpleasant conversation earlier. He told the gentleman to think about it himself. He didn't understand how he could survive alone in the dungeon for long. He thought it might be a trick of the dungeon, but the master said it was not a trick. She was an ordinary mage, and she simply couldn't get out on her own. Then Axion said that even if she was not a mage, there was still one problem. What if she takes advantage of this situation to impersonate a member of the Dark Knight? Then June heard it and almost died of horror. And that's what he says. She decided that she would not silently listen to this nonsense and wanted to tell Axion everything. She turned to him and came closer to him. She said she was grateful for the help and that there had been a misunderstanding between them. And she doesn't meet a Dark Knight, an Archduke, or anything else. She swears by the name of Saint Marianne that she makes no claim to this. This kind of oath is the best guarantee, as Dima says. And she wasn't lying. Mayer invited her himself, and then she said that he might not have known the benefits of magicians in support. So he became embarrassed and said that he now understood his mistake and was very grateful that it had broadened his horizons. He told her to call him Axion. He is the attack mage of the first Dark Knight team. His relationship turned out to be much better than she expected, so the girl was surprised. The lady reflected on the fact that in the first round, Fabian and Mayer often clashed, which is why quarrels constantly arose. And although they may have differences, he is still the best attack mage in the group. It is better to establish a good relationship. She shook his hand and said she had high hopes for him. Axion said he often had to take command in the dungeon, so he could be overly sensitive. This explains why he didn't feel this way when they first met, and she hopes he thinks better of her now. The boy smiled and said that, of course, he was grateful for her understanding, but he also showed her the villagers. Indeed, they are very grateful to Mayer for saving their settlement, and they have prepared a small celebration in his honor, hoping that the Archduke will honor them with his presence. He tries so hard to appear harmless that she doesn't know how others will take it, but she understands his intentions well. They want to establish a relationship in order to take advantage of Mayer and the Dark Knight's reputation. Mayer said he had no time for fun and they were leaving now. The man was surprised and asked him to accept their good intentions. But this is very stupid. The Duke wasn't one to be distracted from his work. He wouldn't agree so easily. She turned to Axion and said it was time for them to leave. But suddenly someone turned to her. The girl was surprised when her name was called. He remarked that he thought she was already dead. The girl was surprised, and he screamed and asked how she had survived. The man approached June and said that she was the only magician in the village, and he believed that she could handle it. June was stunned, and he told her to be sure to close the gate. June told the headman that she was a support mage, not an attack one, and that she had no chance at all on her own, but they wouldn't close themselves if nothing was done. The headman asked if she wanted the villagers to die. June started calling for her dad and stepmother. At the very beginning of the game, support mage June found herself alone in the dungeon. It was a rather strange plot twist, but in fact, she was pushed there by force by her fellow villagers. The woman shouted at her to come in and said that she wanted her brother to die. Even her parents didn't try to stop it, and she immediately understood everything. And now those same people are telling her that she owes them something. They said that she should repay them for taking care of her because they were her family. But June noticed that they weren't even trying to pretend that they were worried about her. And Axion intervened, saying that if she had a family, he didn't understand why they hadn't looked for her. June replied that there was nothing surprising about this. They had personally thrown her out of the village to be sacrificed, and they hardly expected that she would return alive. The guy was shocked by this. They were trying to calm the anger in the dungeon or something like that. He couldn't even believe it. June said that she wouldn't have gone there herself because she wouldn't have been able to kill even one monster. Axion was shocked by this. He couldn't understand what century they were living in. To do such terrible, irrational, delusional things was simply appalling. But the main character decided it made no difference. She couldn't even imagine what the real June must have felt at that moment. And yet, she'd lived in that horrible village since birth. So June decided she wanted to help the hero at any cost. She really wanted the protagonist, Fabian, to take her with him. The only thing she felt towards her fellow villagers was disgust. Of course, she understood perfectly well what they had in mind. She also has the same aversion to her parents. Her mother said she wanted to thank the Duke for saving her. But June said he was busy, and her gratitude would be enough. The men decided to let them through. After all, they were the vice captain's family. Mother said that her gratitude was not enough. They would show her the right examples, but June said it was better to be honest. The stepmother had nothing to be grateful for. And she noted that it was clear that they were not at all happy that she had returned alive. The woman did not understand what kind of stupidity this was. She wanted to make herself out to be a victim and wanted to portray her parents as villains. But June told her parents that they were the ones who pushed her powers into the dungeon, and that's where she almost died. And they decided to pretend that they had forgotten about it. But Father told her to just not talk nonsense. He said they were still family, so there was no need to be angry. But this irritated June even more. They even call themselves parents, which is very low. Axion said he thought they needed to say goodbye now. The parents were shocked. They didn't understand why, but Axion informed them that June Carentia was now a member of the Dark Knight's expedition, and they head to the next dungeon to clear it out. They have no time for nonsense. Her parents were shocked and did not understand whether she was really in this organization and how this was even possible. June noted that she was genuinely trying, but her father couldn't understand that she did it herself. He assumed she was just asking for it, or that they took anyone. Her stepmother said that if they were looking for new children now, then that was great and offered to place Evgen there too. But June said she wasn't going to listen to that nonsense. Her stepmother said the knights were trained from an early age. She just wanted to enlist her son, but June said he was actually 10 years old, and they really did seem like they were going to send a small child with a wooden sword on an expedition. June also noted that this would only cause them trouble. That's why she doesn't want to listen to this nonsense anymore. Axion was simply shocked. He told the guards to take the woman and the man away. The woman said that they should let her go because they were family, but Axion told them to just stop making him laugh. He said he wasn't going to allow it twice, or they thought his words were a joke. He also said that he simply thought that Evgen would be more useful to them than June. Father decided that June should stop these people. Axion asked the girl for forgiveness for having to drive her parents away, but June thought it was no big deal, since they weren't listening to a word she said anyway. She was grateful. He was really cool. Axion said that it was a trifle because people's relationships become stronger when they face a common enemy. They were already ready. They were about to leave. Axion asked if the girl had any luggage, as they would need to pack that too. But the girl replied that she had no luggage and that she was ready. She didn't understand the sad look on Axion's face when he heard this. He looked at her as if she were a child who had nothing to wear. In principle, that was the case. Eugene always received new clothes while growing up, and June had to make do with only old rags, which of course was discrimination. She spent little time with them in the first round, but in the second, everything became clear. He told her not to worry, the vice captain was entitled to a lot of things. They'd even tailor a magical uniform for her. The girl noticed that she already had a uniform, but Axion said that this uniform was for an ordinary mage and didn't stand out, and she was a support mage. When the girl realized that this was true, she said that she felt comfortable in this uniform, especially since their specialization can be determined by the color of their hair. In principle, this is true. The more magical power a person has, the brighter the color of his hair. It's immediately obvious that Axion is a powerful fire-type mage, and she, the support mage, has pale gray hair. One glance made everything clear. Suddenly, someone approached them, and she realized it was Mayer. When she heard his voice, she immediately recognized that it was Mayer. He said that her hair color went very well with the Dark Knight's uniform. The girl was touched by the compliment, but was not sure how the uniform looked on her. Axion was in complete shock, and the girl thought that perhaps he meant that the uniform suited everyone from the Dark Knight. She thanked His Highness, but Mayer asked to be called Captain. He reminded her that he was her boss. The girl smiled, realizing that others didn't call him that, but still decided to continue calling him that. Mayer remarked that the uniform could be made better, and they would tell the tailor something urgently for her when they returned to base. By the way, he almost forgot that upon his return he needed to hold a welcoming ceremony. The girl didn't understand what was wrong with her form, and Mayer also noticed that since she asked to prepare a horse, she needed to go with Axion to the stable, and he would help her choose a horse. The girl was surprised, but it was really good news for her. Usually, only the best knights ride on horseback, while the rest walk. A horse isn't as comfortable as a car, but it's still better than walking. In the first round, June only managed to get a horse halfway through, and now she'll be riding again? Axion turned to his lordship and asked if he was sure June could handle it. The gentleman smiled and said that, of course, he was completely sure of it. Axion noted that he couldn't even imagine that the girl could ride a horse. June said that it was very simple, but Axion added that it was a rather rare skill for an ordinary citizen. June smiled and said she understood. Horses are very valuable animals, so only a small number of people can raise them. Most don't even know how to sit in the saddle. June learned while on an expedition with Fabian. She couldn't tell Axion about this, so she simply said the captain hadn't lasted long. If he'd known she couldn't handle it, he wouldn't have been the type to see others' potential and exploit it. Mayer was a control freak. Especially on an expedition, he wanted everything to go exactly according to plan and for spontaneous changes of position to almost never occur. No matter how competent newcomers are, they have to start from the very bottom. Elite knights should not try to rise to the top, even if they demonstrate high individual abilities. Every change must be approved by Mayer. This is the only way to become an elite Dark Knight. That's why everyone was surprised by her appointment. He forced her to join, she simply saw no other options. Axion also told June that she knows him well, highlighting her feelings. June said that it really is clear at a glance. She doesn't say that she has known him since the first round. She needs to be more careful in her statements in the future. The knights watched as June rode alongside His Highness. Mayer was ahead of everyone. Next to him was Axion. It was immediately clear who was in the lead here, but June, although she was Fabian's partner, never felt equal to him. They were his childhood friends, close friends. Decca and April. Incidentally, since they were never equals, it's unclear why June thought Fabian wouldn't leave her. June decided to simply not think about it. Mayer couldn't be trusted completely either. One betrayal was enough. This time, she would draw the line. Mayer is an assistant in the destruction of the Islas, nothing more. The gentleman said that it was time for them to move, and they began to move. Fellow villagers noticed June and were shocked that she survived. They couldn't understand how a support mage could be accepted as a Dark Knight. They thought it was just some kind of nonsense. They approached Correnti's family and asked how this had happened and if they even knew what was going on. Her parents immediately said they didn't know, and the girl realized that it looked like they would both remain silent. She's probably ashamed to talk about the daughter they banished. Mayer inquired about land as an introductory gift for June. The girl was surprised and asked what she was even talking about. The gentleman said that she was in such a bad way with the governor, she was constantly receiving taxes. And you can even change the village headman at any time. And since this is her home village, he can support her. If she wants to create a guild here, he'll facilitate it. Everyone was in complete shock that this girl actually joined the Dark Knight. When she turned back, she heard someone say they were even giving her land. She must have a high position, and the village would flourish if they opened a guild here. But many believed that June would not support them because the headman had expelled her and her parents had never respected her. Was it because of them that they would miss such an opportunity? Because of this, the village headman and June's parents began to be despised. It's not even funny. They found scapegoats and thought that June would forget about everything. They're all the same. If she agrees, she'll have to fight this anger. That's why she said she'd rather give up the land where such people live. The dungeons were more comfortable than with them, so she asked Meyer to choose something else for her. The gentleman, of course, agreed, and then the girl realized that this really wouldn't change much. But the attitude towards the headman and parents will now be different. Being in the Dark Knight was very convenient. When she joined Fabian, everyone just laughed that she was fooled. This time, they won't even come within cannon range. They've left the village and the base is probably still a long way off. She hadn't used it for a long time, but decided it was worth a try. The main character has a special skill related to the game system, ability to open the interface and view the status. She can quickly check her stats, or even see the enemy's status and cooldown boost. She has information that no one else in this world has. And she can check her level at any time without using any equipment. She's currently at level 23, but was originally at 20. It seems the Dark Knight's fighters gain a fair amount of experience from clearing dungeons. Fabian also fought monsters in the first round, but only with those who were in her way. She hadn't been in a dungeon before, so she lacked experience, but he was surprisingly talented. While he was teaching her, she couldn't even use her skills properly, but this only irritated the other people in the group. So the proposal at level 20 was quite unexpected. At first, she thought that he simply didn't realize how weak she was. But he said he didn't care. They would just raise her level. But she said that adding her to the group would greatly lower the Dark Knight's average level. Mayer stated that he would still be above average in Fabian's group. It was obvious, and it was hard to disagree. She knew he was right. She had no arguments to argue with, and she had to admit he was right on this point. Mayer was in the 80 range, and even if you only counted the two of them, the average would still be around 50. To fight the Demon King, one needed to be at least level 60. This was the minimum requirement for such an opponent. They barely reached the required level in the first round, but that was just the beginning of their journey. The opponent turned out to be much stronger. Mayer was in the 80s from the start, which put him in a much better position to fight. He also had resistance to physical attacks, possibly because he was the core of a Demon King, and his magic attack was high. Meyer's magical defense was weaker compared to his other stats, but it was still significantly higher than many other people's. All this explained why all attempts to kill him had failed. He was too powerful to be destroyed so easily. If she had immediately verified that his level and strength were as she thought, she would not have wasted so much time on surveillance and useless attempts. The guy she saw was Nova Pelham. He was considered the group's rising star and was very friendly, reminding her of his brother. To kill Meyer, she had to communicate with Nova. She tried to extract information from him about dungeons that Nox clearly couldn't conquer. But the Duke always returned, and Nova quickly raised her levels, which significantly complicated her plan. June continued to thank him for allowing her to rise through the ranks of the Dark Knight. It was her doing, and she always felt that gratitude. It was all possible thanks to him. But now June felt guilty. She felt like she'd used him for her own ends, and he'd never joined in. This bothered her deeply, and she resolved to treat him better in the future. Mayer noticed her looking somewhere and turned to her with a question, wondering where she was looking. He was always attentive to her behavior, and this didn't escape his notice. June realized her thoughtful gaze was too conspicuous. It began to bother her, and she felt a slight sense of embarrassment. She wasn't used to such attentiveness from Mayer. She replied that she was simply lost in thought, trying to hide her nervousness. The gentleman smiled, noticing her oddity, and said that she had always been unusual, which only added to the interest in her personality. Meyer may have thought her behavior was suspicious, especially when she was staring into space. She decided to be more careful next time and avoid such behavior. The horseback ride was boring, and June couldn't escape the feeling. She decided to share this with him, even though she knew he probably wouldn't be particularly interested in her experiences. When they arrived at the base, everyone would surely be surprised by her presence. It would be unusual, and June couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement before all her colleagues greeted her. She realized that having a support mage on the team now significantly changed the group's dynamic. It could influence their future actions, and she was curious how the others would react. The important point was that this support mage had come at the captain's personal request. This was rather odd, considering he didn't usually make such decisions. The whole thing remained a mystery. Some players began to consider him a cheater due to his ability to assemble the strongest characters. This made the Dark Knight even more powerful and influential, and many took notice. It was strange that no one of such powerful figures had been personally invited. This added even more questions and confusion regarding the actions of the Duke and his team. June noticed that their expedition was full of strong and experienced people. Each one was special, and she felt that her place here wasn't just a coincidence. It was part of her journey. Axion confirmed that the Duke truly had everything he needed to select warriors based on their true abilities. This was a departure from other expeditions, where origins were always taken into account. In other expeditions, origin or material investment was important, making the Duke's approach entirely unique and special. His selection was based on the warrior's true qualities. He has enough money and power in his baggage compartment to command respect, and enough authority to help anyone. It's hard to imagine anyone who wouldn't want to come under his protection. The man was certain that this was precisely why the lady had joined their unit and soon became its commander. She possessed qualities that compelled men to follow her. Oksana insisted she wouldn't obey a weak leader. It was important to her that everyone in the dungeon be useful. Anyone who couldn't be useful right away had to start from the bottom. For June, the situation was completely obvious. It was as if she already knew much about her place in this world, as if her life's path had been predetermined. Members of the Red Wolf Squad said June was a good fit for Nox. They believed he genuinely liked her, and it didn't go unnoticed. One could say she's simply talented. But such words can sometimes be misunderstood, as not everyone would perceive it as a simple statement of fact. The Dark Knight was said to be one of the best expeditions. Talents like June's found themselves naturally. She asked if they were recruiting. June confirmed her words and asked again if this happened the same way when they accidentally met someone with talent. It wasn't a casual question, but rather a test. The girl repeated her words again. A challenger had now appeared, but it was unclear how things would go from here, as no one knew what trials awaited. Many might want to become Myrnox's warriors, given how easily June got through. Previously, everyone had to pass entrance exams, which gave only a limited chance. The Dark Knight entrance exams were a spectacle of incredible power. People from all over the world gathered to demonstrate their abilities, and the audience could judge each person's level. Some decided to try their luck before joining other groups. This was nothing unusual, as everyone was trying to find their way in life. Many tried to become a Dark Knight more than once. Many people never made it, and their numbers only grew with each passing year, arousing envy. June remarked that, indeed, she too would have thought that someone who was a yellow support mage couldn't become captain. It seemed incredible. Surprisingly, there were people who were genuinely happy to see her. This was a surprise for the girl, as she hadn't expected such warmth and support. She knew the position would be more trouble than it was worth. But she still said they were there thanks to his lordship, who had insisted on it. June noted that some might be against it, but she assured that once they saw Miss June's skills, everyone would immediately understand how capable she was, and that it would be for the benefit of everyone. Everything he said was exactly the same as the moment they first met. His words were clear and confident, and she immediately remembered that moment when they first started working together. June asked him if he was truly proud of it, and Axion replied that the problem was that the village's true strength could only be demonstrated in the dungeon, where everything was for real. Perhaps she could have asked his lordship about it, but she was surprised that he wanted to do it right now. It seemed too hasty a decision for such an important task. According to them, the exam would be held a few weeks after returning to base, and June began preparing for this event, realizing that a lot of work awaited her. Jinya merely laughed at her thoughts, but June thought that Axion's idea might not have been so bad. She could use it to her advantage to improve the situation. Time was flying by and her position in the expedition was rather precarious, so she began to think about whether she should create her own group with new people to strengthen her position. A man approached her and asked her to look in that direction, but June could not understand what exactly he wanted to show her, and her curiosity only grew stronger with each passing moment. The gentleman announced that they were almost there, and June felt a surge of excitement and anticipation wash over her. She was ready to see what awaited them at the new base and how everything would be arranged. They arrived in the Principality of Noctantaria. This was their base, and everyone with them was overjoyed to see them return. The atmosphere was filled with joy and relief. June was surprised, as this was her first time visiting another expedition's base, and everything looked new to her. Lots of new faces and impressions. It was actually surprising that he already had such a base, perhaps because he was an archduke. He was very influential and wealthy, which allowed him to maintain several detachments. Yes, and he could support 3 squads of knights at once, and now June also felt like a bit of a cheater, realizing that her position in this structure also had certain advantages. The gentleman, as always, met her in the Noctanteria. His presence, despite the atmosphere filled with difficult events, caught her attention, and it did not go unnoticed. The main character, June Carentia, admitted that she now truly feels like she has become part of the Dark Knight, having for the first time become imbued with the feeling of this place and her role in it. Mayor Knox was somewhat puzzled and irritated by her words. He hadn't expected her to feel this way until now, believing her affection should have been evident much earlier. The girl, noticing his reaction, quickly said she hadn't meant anything by it. Mayor, understanding her concern, told her to remember that this was now her base, her place to live and act. Although they hadn't yet crossed paths in this round, Mayor clearly wanted to get ahead of Fabian, and it showed in his actions. He must have remembered how Fabian had taken the Demon King from him by acting first. Or else Mayor thought that June was still yearning for the old times, for old acquaintances and habits, which also haunted him, making him doubt her intentions. The girl smiled and softly said that, of course, she agreed with his words, but she understood that they should move on and develop their relationship within the Dark Knight. However, she believed problems could arise if Mayor didn't trust her. She felt that trust was an essential element of their interaction and that without it, it would be difficult to move forward. Mayor, having considered her words, decided to show her the castle as part of her introduction to the Dark Knight. He believed it would help June better understand the place where she would now be working and living. June was a little surprised, not understanding why Mayor was so concerned about her company if their goal was to show her the castle and secure her presence within the structure where her role had already been determined. The girl explained that she didn't mind his company. She simply thought he probably had other things to do. She emphasized that, as vice captain, her presence couldn't be useless. Mayor remained silent, unsure how to respond to her remark, but aware that if she went with him, it would attract the attention of the newcomers. He considered the importance of not attracting unnecessary attention. June realized that in such a situation, it would be better to ask Axion or another person to accompany her in order to avoid unnecessary attention from the newcomers and not disrupt the progress of plans within their group. When June looked back, she saw no one and couldn't figure out where her companions who had just recently been following her had gone. This greatly confused her. Fabian and the others quickly realized where this could lead and decided to disappear, while the gentleman assumed that she had lost something and was looking for it. Despite her anxiety, the girl reassured everyone, declaring that she was fine and that they could continue on their way without further delay. Her words reassured those around her. Even though June was the captain, she couldn't understand how her pseudo-friends could do such a thing, leave a newbie behind and just run away without caring about how she would cope. The butler was very glad that Ruskin returned safe and sound, because this meant that everything was fine and no one was hurt, despite the possible dangers. June was a little surprised to learn that the base, in addition to the others, also had a butler who played a special role here, giving the whole place a special atmosphere. The gentleman was pleased to meet Vince and immediately noted that he needed an introduction. This girl was June Carentia, vice captain of the expedition they were traveling with. June was a little taken aback by the gentleman's sudden revelation of so much. She was surprised that he hadn't withheld information about her without telling her in advance. The gentleman noted that he had been looking for a talented person like June for a long time, and added that there was no need to offend her, because she deserved respect for her achievements. It seemed that June couldn't process all the news at once, and the gentleman also said that she would probably have some wishes regarding her room and conditions. But June was a little nervous when she voiced her request. She just wanted a bigger bed to feel comfortable in this new place. June couldn't understand why the butler was acting so strangely, or why Mayor was showing her such unusual kindness. She believed it had something to do with their shared memories. Perhaps he is interested not only in their past, but also in the information she has, as it could be important for his plans. She had absolutely no idea what he was planning, and that made things difficult for her. She felt like the situation was slipping away from her. As they walked through the estate, the servants were astonished to see his lordship personally accompanying June. Everyone had assumed she was simply one of the team. June felt herself growing uneasy, wanting to hide behind the flowers. He kept talking about her, and it was embarrassing. She noticed that her hair was gray, which could mean she was a support mage, but no one understood how she ended up among the Dark Knights. She'd always disliked such conclusions. When people tried to determine magical affiliation based on hair color, it was only useful for powerful offensive mages. June knew that if she had heard the conversations, then Meyer surely couldn't have failed to hear them too. This made her feel uneasy. However, Meyer seemed to be playing a role, pretending not to notice these conversations, which puzzled June. She couldn't understand what he was trying to achieve. June finally decided they needed to continue their journey. She couldn't wander around the estate with him forever. It was starting to get on her nerves. Meyer was surprised by her decision, stating that they hadn't even reached the main castle yet, and she was already getting ready to leave. June replied that she simply couldn't remember so many new places at once. She needed time to figure out what was going on. It was strange to hear such words from a former member of a group that had defended many difficult dungeons. His role had been crucial, and now he sat next to me and spoke of it with such calm. He probably already realized she was making excuses, but in reality, he knew she was bothered by the attention from others, and it was bothering her. He saw everything much more clearly than she did. The girl understood that while she was with them, it would be easier to write her name into history, secure her place, and take a step that would be remembered. Now she understood why he had accompanied her. Meyer was confident that if everyone saw how supportive he was of her, the protests against her appointment would gradually fade. His support gave her the confidence she needed to take further steps. If he'd offered her a more low-profile position, all the problems might have simply disappeared, but he took a risk and offered her a more serious role. This added to the excitement, but also to the opportunity. The gentleman couldn't remember if he'd said it, but he always disliked wasting time. He knew they would be constantly consulting, and her promotion was only a matter of time. The girl was grateful that he believed in her abilities so much and gave her a chance to develop, but deep down, she knew it wasn't as easy as he thought. Her anxiety didn't go away. To avoid wasting time, she needed money or loyal people to really move forward. But until she had either, she felt like she was in limbo. Now, she could only rely on herself, her own strength and luck. Time would tell how her plans would unfold, but she still harbored many doubts and fears that needed to be addressed. At first, she'd have to try twice as hard, perhaps even heeding Axion's advice and asking to be taken underground. It was sound advice from an elder who had endured many trials. The gentleman asked her not to even consider resigning. He was confident she could handle it, and her journey was just beginning. The girl said it wasn't that important to her. She felt fine and enjoyed her work. There was nothing extraordinary about what was happening to her. If she reaches the level of the other expedition members, the battle with the Demon King will become much easier. This will increase her chances of success and improve her standing in the group. The future will be much more peaceful, especially if she manages to strengthen her territory, reputation, and property. These factors will make her feel more confident. If Meyer defeats the Demon King and becomes Emperor, new opportunities will open up for her. She could gain numerous privileges that will help her in the future. This was her first time in such an important position, and she knew she had to live up to the trust placed in her. The task would be challenging, but she was determined to succeed. The gentleman noted that he was confident in her ability to cope with the task, but warned that if it became too difficult or tiring, she could always turn to him for help. The girl considered his words, wondering if perhaps this was how all heirs to duchies were taught these days. In her eyes, it was a new and unusual approach. A leader who can support their subordinates easily inspires trust. Such a person will always be the center of attention and will set an example for others. The girl suggested finishing the tour, to which the gentleman agreed. They could discuss the rest the next time the opportunity arose. The gentleman made arrangements with her and offered to escort her to her room so she could rest. He was ready to help her in any situation, even if it seemed unimportant. The girl was surprised and a little frightened when he said he would walk her to her room. It was unexpected, and she couldn't understand why he needed to do it personally. She didn't understand why he wanted to walk her to her room, especially since she was used to making decisions on her own. This action embarrassed her a little, but she didn't mind. Meyer announced that she had some free time, which she could use to relax. This was unexpected, but entirely appropriate given the current situation. She intended to use this short break to get used to the new conditions and try to adapt as much as possible to the changes happening around her. June Terentia, noticing her words, asked how much time she would have for this rest. The gentleman replied, "Until the meeting planned for her ceremony." Mayer added that this time wouldn't be long, but still enough to get some rest. Her answer was confident. She knew how to appreciate such moments of relaxation. June realized she still had an important presentation to make. She would likely have to give a speech, and the gentleman believed her anxiety was caused by fear of public speaking. However, the girl explained that it wasn't fear, but rather that she disliked public speaking. She'd always preferred to convey information through presentations rather than through speeches. Mayer noted that, regardless of her opinion, she would have no choice and would likely have to speak. But ultimately, she wouldn't ask him to cancel the speech. They soon arrived at the place the gentleman had spoken of. Mayer pointed to the spacious area where they were now waiting for her, a place symbolizing her identity as the Dark Knight's vice captain. June, feeling relieved, looked around. The nature and surroundings were truly peaceful, and the comfortable bed in the room promised a good rest. She was grateful for that. The gentleman remained silent, only reminding her that if she felt the need, she could always call him, and he would be there. However, everything depended on her wishes and needs. And finally, June felt relief. She was alone in the room, free of prying eyes and tension, which gave her long-awaited freedom. The moment she was alone, June realized that with Mayer by her side, they were attracting too much attention. She felt uneasy about being constantly watched. Now that she was in her room, she decided to simply rest and relax. She had time to herself, and she enjoyed this quiet moment alone. June stretched out on the bed, feeling her body finally relax. It was a real relief after a day full of meetings and conversations that had drained so much of her energy. Peaceful sleep came quickly. In her dreams, June relived the memories of being called Fabian's little dog. It was strange, but the feeling of such affection haunted her. It soon became clear to her that her name had become associated with sacrificial magic, which was causing numerous misunderstandings. It was absurd, especially for a support mage, but her reputation was at risk. Thanks to the girl's actions, Fabian can now continue to use his sword. This was a crucial decision, as the sword is his weapon, a symbol of strength and independence. The girl couldn't hide her disappointment. As a loyal companion, her master's safety should always come first, and she was concerned for his well-being. Her decision seemed absurd, and it made her feel sad. At that moment, there was a knock on her door, asking if the vice captain was in her room. The girl thought she might be asleep, as she hadn't left her room in a while. The maid asked why they needed her specifically, which made the girl wary. Suddenly, she heard someone talking and her name being called. She immediately got out of bed, not expecting anyone to be looking for her at that moment. She approached the door, asking what had happened that they were calling her so loudly. Curiosity overcame her fatigue, and she decided to find out what was going on. The maid greeted her and explained that her name was Maria and that she would take care of the girl while her mistress remained at the castle. This care was supposed to make her day more pleasant. The maid, already awake, brought water for washing. The girl noticed her attention, surprised that she could get such trifles in such a place. She tried to understand what exactly the maid meant by bringing her water for washing. What kind of concern was this, and why was she so insistent in offering her help? The girl nevertheless allowed the maid in. She was a little puzzled, unable to understand where people willing to help with such simple things as washing themselves came from. The water the maid brought was special. It was warm and clean, and the girl hadn't seen water like that in a long time. Everything seemed so unusual, even surprising. At that moment, it became clear to her that life in the castle was very different from the expeditions she'd experienced with Fabian. Everything remained the same, even when she sacrificed her arm for his safety. No one believed she could handle it, given how difficult the situation was. But her skills proved to be top-notch, which came as a real surprise to everyone around her. Fabian always supported her, but even his sincere words couldn't fully convey how much he cared about her fate. He never admitted that her efforts were the deciding factor. He could have truly appreciated her abilities for once, at least said something positive, but instead he remained silent and reserved. This upset her. This experience taught her an important lesson. Sometimes people sacrifice themselves not for others, but for their own satisfaction. You can't expect recognition from others. Everything must come from the heart. After that, she decided that such mistakes would not be repeated in the Dark Night. She would not take unnecessary risks for others and would learn to strike a healthy balance between work and personal life. She realized that the most important thing was to find harmony between her work and personal life, without overloading herself with obligations that could drain her energy and rob her of happiness. In such conditions, like those of large corporations with good working conditions, she felt much more secure. The maid noticed that her mistress was pleased. The lady explained with a smile that her joy was simply a reaction to small things. Sometimes it's in such trifles that she finds true pleasure. She treasures moments of peace. The maid couldn't help but ask whether her mistress would eat in the officer's mess or prefer another place. This was an important decision for her, as she could offer assistance. The lady asked with interest if the maid would accompany her to the dining room. She expected this small request to be fulfilled, but she didn't realize the full depth of this gesture. The maid replied that of course, she was ready to help, and together they headed to the required location. When they arrived, the mistress clarified the maid's role. The maid stated that her duties included cleaning, decorating the room, preparing meals, and assisting with scheduling. She was to be on hand at all times to ensure order. It sounded more like a secretary's role, and June was a little surprised. She decided to ask if all the knights had such assistants. The maid replied that this wasn't actually the case. She had assistants, but only 5 people. Besides herself and the captain had permanent help. The maid explained that his lordship generally avoids such matters. He prefers to focus solely on the dungeons and important matters. She added that Mayor genuinely dislikes wasting time on such things. He's always looking for ways to free himself from routine concerns so he can focus on other things. The maid thought there should be more workers here, but for now, everything is temporary. The number may increase in the future when the situation stabilizes. So far, only 1 maid has been assigned to June, but her duties may soon expand, and perhaps several more assistants will be assigned. June was very surprised and asked again if it was true that there should be other people. The maid confirmed that it was indeed so, since June held an important position. Being subordinate to the Duke was certainly prestigious, but June understood that it was not necessary to have many people under her command in order to be effective. The conversation with the maid was calm and relaxed. Perhaps Mary would be perfectly capable of handling all the duties, and June would be pleased with her work. June no longer worried about the little things and decided to let Mary take care of everything. She would trust her until more serious issues arose. The maid confidently promised to do everything to the highest standard. She understood the importance of the assignment and was prepared to make every effort to complete it flawlessly. The mistress was unsure whether to immediately entrust her with such an important task, since they had only just met. However, the maid showed determination, and her words sounded confident. June thought it would be better if the maid brought her a quill and a blank journal. These were simple things, but they had become essential for further work. The maid nodded and said she'd prepare everything as needed. She didn't see anything difficult in it. After all, she was used to being given various assignments, and always did her job well. June understood that if she wanted the Dark Knight to defeat the Demon King, she needed to prepare in advance. Preparation took time, and she was willing to put in the effort. The first round had taken a long time to prepare, but now she was captain. The situation had changed, and she felt the task would take even less time. She decided it would be best to begin preparing early. This would avoid rushing and panic in the future when a quick response to new threats would be necessary. June came to the conclusion that she needed to compile a detailed guide to this world. This would allow her to keep everything under control and minimize the unpredictability of the situation. The lady immediately began writing. She knew it would take a long time, but her notes gradually began to take shape. This was essential to the success of her plans. She'd already done something similar in the first round, but now, with experience, she was able to complete the work in just 2 days. This was a much faster result than before. This journal contains a wealth of valuable information about dungeons and item acquisition methods. All entries have been carefully organized and structured for ease of use. It was a sort of reference book. She'd done something similar in the first round, so she'd always have information at hand that could be useful at any moment. She never showed the diary to anyone. Even if someone had asked, she would have kept it hidden, because it was her only secret, one she kept only to herself. She convinced everyone that it was a unique magical support skill, not found in ordinary magic schools. Now, looking back on the situation, she realizes she was right in her conclusions. The second round was ruined, and if she had revealed the information about it, everything might have been different. Especially after Fabian abandoned her for the Ring of Fire, leaving her no chance of success. He used the information she shared with him from the first round to defeat the Demon King. He thought it was enough to advance to the next round without any surprises. But even so, she felt he no longer needed her. After all, sharing important information with another expedition would be much more difficult after she'd already been betrayed once. But perhaps Fabian realizes she remembers everything that happened in the first round. This could be the key moment that will force him to make a decision she can't yet predict. She didn't rule out the possibility that he might want to destroy her to prevent her from telling anyone anything important, and now she didn't know what to do to avoid this danger. Strangely enough, despite all this, she still began to cooperate with Mayer in order to survive. But unsure whether she should trust him, she wasn't sure whether to show him her diary. After all, if Nox was truly interested in her magical support skills and the dungeon information she possessed, he could use her and then simply dispose of her as an unnecessary tool. If she gave him the diary, she would immediately become useless and betrayed. She knew she could simply be abandoned, as had happened before, and that was too dangerous for her. Besides, it would be strange and suspicious if everyone found out that she had such important information, while she remained in the shadows, hiding her true intentions from everyone. In the dungeon, Jun Carinthia failed to enter in the first round. Everything was written in Korean, making the information almost incomprehensible to her. Although she tried to figure it out, it was too difficult. Mary, although she trusts June, can't tell her directly about the diary because she works for Meyer Knox. June understands that her relationship with Mary can't be too open, as she's subordinate. June knew it would be suspicious to give Mary money to keep her quiet. It was best not to take risks in such a matter, especially if it could lead to instability in their relationship. Ultimately, she decided to hide the diary, at least until she found people she could completely trust. It was safer than sharing this information with just anyone. Mayer couldn't blame her for this, because he himself hid many things. He understood that in this world, one often had to hide the truth to survive, and he was no exception. Some things truly must be hidden to keep one's life safe. The world they live in leaves no room for open weakness or honesty. For several days, June Carinthia didn't leave her room, preferring to remain alone. Her thoughts and inner worries haunted her, and she wasn't ready to meet people. Her absence from public view had become a habit, and now she felt strange appearing among others. Her habit of remaining in the shadows intensified, and the stares from outside only began to add to the tension. This behavior, in fact, only fueled the curiosity of those around her. They increasingly tried to understand why June was avoiding communication and why they weren't appearing in her presence. If she truly didn't want to attract attention, she could have simply eaten in the officers' mess. It would have been less crowded, and there wouldn't have been so many questions about her decision to remain discreet. However, she hadn't yet been officially assigned, so she was forced to go to the common dining room. This was a necessary step to avoid appearing disconnected from the team and its responsibilities. This dining hall was where ordinary members of the expedition gathered, and the food here was no less high quality, despite the more modest atmosphere. It wasn't quite as upscale, but it still provided good food. Mayer Knox would never allow himself to be like others. He was far more demanding, and his approach to cost-cutting was strict. It was important to him that everything be top-notch, without compromise. In the dungeon, she had to work hard not only to complete the task, but also to show her gratitude to Meyer. Her actions and decisions were always under his control, and she couldn't let him down. June overheard the knights discussing her relationship with the captain. They claimed he intended to make her his wife, and they sounded quite confident about it. She couldn't understand where such rumors came from. She became curious as to who exactly could have come up with such nonsense and started spreading it among everyone. Turning around, she saw that the knights were leading the conversation. They claimed that the captain had not only invited her personally, but had also promoted her to vice captain, which added credence to their words. There were times when she acted as a support mage, and the knights couldn't understand why she was assigned to such an important role in the Dark Knighthood. It seemed strange to them. June replied that it was all just speculation, and that perhaps they were simply drawing their conclusions based on rumors rather than facts. It was just their guesswork. She added that it's possible the captain and this girl simply have some kind of hidden relationship, or that they've been lovers for a long time. But all of this remained speculative. June was stunned by what she had just heard. The rumors circulating around her name and the captain seemed completely absurd and made no sense. The knights, however, believed such a relationship could be perfectly natural. So many exceptions had been made for the vice captain that everything seemed suspicious. They believed that when it came to love, people could act in ways that defied logic. They couldn't find any other explanation for what was happening. In their view, June couldn't have been so important to the demon-slaying effort that her behavior would cause such exceptions. They sought a simpler explanation. June noticed that when the captain was near this girl, his face took on the expression of a man in love. It didn't look like a normal relationship at all. The knights began to ponder what this could mean, and decided that perhaps they had already begun dating. Such a development seemed entirely plausible to them. June was shocked. She decided not to interfere in this conversation and let the rumors spread without paying attention. He wasn't falling in love with her. He was falling in love with her talent, and she tried to convince herself of this. It seemed his feelings were directed not at her, but at her abilities. Talent like hers isn't easy to come by. She tried to figure out how else to deny these stupid rumors. She wasn't happy with how quickly they were being distorted. She tried to be open about the relationship, but he was focused solely on the dungeon. In the eyes of others, he was known as an iron wall, impenetrable to women. In fact, he'd never invited anyone before. After all, there's a first time for everything, and this meeting could be unusual too. And despite everything, she couldn't believe that it was actually easier for him to believe in her feelings than in the possibility of support from her. Previously, she was called a dog, but now it seems that has changed. What was considered her weakness has become something new and not so obvious. These rumors were pure nonsense, and she knew she had to do something about them immediately. Ignoring them was impossible. The situation demanded intervention. When she looked up, she immediately noticed Axio. He was standing next to her and, as if by chance, met her gaze, asking what she was doing there. The guy greeted her politely and explained that he'd simply noticed her presence and decided to stop by. He didn't want to hide anything. His actions were completely natural. What was interesting was that he asked why she had come here when there was a separate mess hall for officers. There was clearly something unusual about her choice of location. The lady noted that she was aware of the situation, but since she had not yet officially assumed her duties, she still had much to process. Axion was surprised by her commitment to this matter. She explained that in such a situation, she couldn't afford to say much even if she wanted to. Everything was too delicate and required caution. Axion understood her position, but couldn't resist sharing his own opinion. He admitted that he enjoyed talking, and here was his advice for her. She couldn't even imagine what it would be like. Axion added that spreading gossip was a fun pastime. Everyone enjoyed discussing other people's secrets, even if they were from the most private places. However, in his opinion, those who interfere in other people's affairs merely out of curiosity should be punished. He was convinced that this was unfair and vicious. His words rang out loudly enough for the other knights standing nearby to immediately take notice of his remark. Each of them waited for him to continue. June noted that this was a rather harsh statement, but Axion had no doubt. In their situation, such measures were justified. In the dungeon, doubts can cost lives, and that must be clear to everyone. He emphasized that everyone must clearly understand who they can rely on, who they can trust with their life. No one is allowed to interfere with his lordship's feelings out of idle curiosity. Rumors about Mare soon began to circulate, and as soon as they reached his ears, he immediately became enraged. His reaction was swift and furious. June admitted that when she first met him, she too couldn't understand what exactly was expected of her. It was a vague, incomprehensible feeling that she couldn't quite pinpoint. Axion noted that there's a clear difference between misunderstanding and fabrication. He explained that one shouldn't simply accept such rumors as truth, but if you look at it from a different perspective, things aren't so bad. The girl asked him what exactly made him think that way. She sensed his explanation didn't quite satisfy her curiosity, and she wanted to understand why he held such an opinion. The guy explained that it was because they had begun to perceive her as one of their own, as one of them. He was certain that it was this closeness and trust that had led to the rumors spreading so forcefully. The girl asked him again if he doubted it. She felt he might doubt her behavior, that she might perceive his words differently than he expected. Axion said she wouldn't be the first to run away after joining the ranks. The lady asked him if he thought she too would run away over trivial matters like rumors and omissions. The girl was very sensitive to such questions and asked what exactly could be the reason the newcomers were leaving so quickly. She couldn't figure out what was scaring them, and that became her question. She already knew a lot about the Dark Knights, their goals and duties, but she still wanted to hear the exact reason, so she could be prepared for possible difficulties in the future and not be caught off guard. The girl decided not to ignore the matter and asked Axion what could have caused her to run away. The gentleman reminded her that, according to him, his lordship had invited no one but her. She confirmed his words, saying she understood why he needed a support mage. However, she felt their reaction to the rumors was overly violent and perhaps unworthy of such attention. That's true, but for the most part, they understand his character well and don't expect anything different from his actions. He's always been like this, and they've already gotten used to his quirks. He no longer pays attention to other matters. He is completely preoccupied with one thing: closing the dungeon gates. Everything else seems secondary and uninteresting to him. Now, the girl clearly understood his motives, seeing that nothing was more important to him than this mission. This became clear the next time she observed him. Meyer is renowned for his hatred of the monsters and demons that inhabit the dungeons. He strives to cleanse them, and this is perceived as a virtue in his work. Meyer's behavior can sometimes be difficult to call normal. His actions can seem strange and even eccentric, but no one would dare confront him about it. Perhaps the wind hidden within his body is the cause of this strange behavior. However, it's difficult to say for sure what exactly is affecting his psyche. As soon as a new dungeon appears, they immediately head there to defend it and destroy anything that might threaten their safety or goals. Due to such a demanding schedule, from time to time someone in the group leaves, unable to cope with the workload. This has become a common occurrence, no longer surprising to anyone. Most of those who joined them were newcomers, interested only in the glory that would come from participating in expeditions. They hoped for easy pickings. These people thought that they could simply shoot magic from afar without being exposed to serious danger, and at the same time earn all the laurels and glory, but it doesn't always work out that way. This decision was correct, because the newcomers believe that it is better to be part of the Dark Knight's team than to participate in other expeditions with less successful results. However, the conditions of life in the group are too harsh for these people. There are those who come here with great ambitions to defeat the Demon King and become heroes, but most of them are too afraid for their lives to risk it for fame. Unlike them, Meyer adheres to firm principles and is not prone to doubt. That's why he sincerely respects him despite all his eccentricities. But despite this, he still perceives him as a person who thinks only of his goal. June Carentia was shocked by his words of respect. She even thought he was a little crazy, because it was hard to believe he was sincere. But the girl quickly noticed that he didn't seem to care much about the opinions of others. He was absorbed in his own thoughts, as if nothing could distract him. And although she tried to show tolerance for his stubbornness, Axion casually noted that, despite everything, he still noticed certain changes in her behavior. June was surprised, but Axion calmly explained that he was actually thinking about her. He'd been thinking a lot, and these thoughts seemed to be the most important thing to him. She blushed slightly, feeling a burning sensation inside her. She sheepishly asked him if it was true. Axion explained that he'd initially been trying to choose a room that would suit her. Until recently, he'd never shown himself like that. And something in his tone when he asked to be called captain added a strange tenderness. Axion said that she was the only one he allowed this to, and also complimented her appearance, noting the shape and color of her hair. He was visibly agitated, and his strange reaction caught her attention. He said he thought he was only able to notice such things in the dungeon. At first, Meyer seemed more commanding and confident. June Carentia looked at him as if he were an ordinary person, but Axion clearly reacted to this more strongly than he should have. Perhaps this was a side of him she hadn't noticed before, and she couldn't understand why his attention was suddenly so strongly drawn to her. Or maybe he'd changed since they'd met. Perhaps he'd begun to sense that she stood out from the crowd, but it was still a mystery to her. He immediately chose her as vice captain, perhaps for his own ulterior motives. June didn't understand how her special position would help in defending the dungeon, but it was all part of his plan. The lady asked if he really thought it was more convenient than admitting that she was his mistress, emphasizing that such questions required serious clarification. Axion tried to say something, but his words fell on deaf ears. He felt that nothing he said would change the current situation. The girl, without hiding her thoughts, said that since everyone thinks this way, they should somehow clarify the situation once and for all in order to stop the rumors. Axion hoped everything would settle down after the dungeon expedition. He believed it would somehow distract from current issues and give him time to reflect. The girl noted that her real intention was precisely this: to understand the situation and figure out what to do next. Now everything was clear to her. She finally realized the rumors circulating about them and how much had been distorted. But she tried to ignore the nonsense and remain calm. Realizing she would enjoy more privileges on the expedition, she decided to seize the opportunity and take advantage of them. On the spur of the moment, she decided to ask Axion an important question. She asked where the captain usually dined. It was a question that had been troubling her for a long time, and now she decided to clarify it so she could proceed with confidence. He told her, and she quickly found the place where the captain preferred to spend time alone, and she became curious about what he was doing there. When she approached and knocked, she was immediately allowed in. She was a little nervous, but when she heard his voice, she knew this was a moment she couldn't put off. When she entered, she noticed that the captain was clearly in a bad mood, and this made her feel that perhaps she should not have come now. However, having gathered her strength, she said they hadn't seen each other for a long time. It was her way of starting a conversation and trying to establish some kind of connection in a difficult situation. When the gentleman saw June, his face immediately broke into a smile, and he decided she had come to him with some important question or request. He was sure of it. His voice suddenly became soft and soothing, as if he wanted to linger with her. Something about her presence perhaps caught his attention. Now that the mood had calmed considerably, June felt some relief and her tension eased somewhat. The atmosphere around her became more welcoming. She explained that she wanted to discuss something important, and also noticed that there was someone else in the room. Apparently, this was unexpected for her. June recognized the man dressed in a dark knight's uniform as wearing white robes, which she assumed might belong to a priest. The master, as if nothing had happened, said he had forgotten to introduce them. The gentleman noted with mild surprise that it was Augustus de Vanitas. June tensed slightly, not expecting to meet him in this place. He was the best priest on their expedition, and June was seeing him for the first time. However, she remembered some information about him from the game, so her interest was immediately piqued. August was known as the Dark Knight's chief healer, and was also considered Meyer Knox's right-hand man. Although he was a battle priest, he essentially only dealt with healing. He was once credited with a strange saying, "The stronger your muscles, the better you heal." It sounded strange, but no one dared to refute his words. Despite the absurdity of this statement, he had such authority that no one even thought to argue with him. Everyone simply accepted his wisdom. The gentleman turned to the priest Augustus and, without wasting any time, introduced June to him. He said she would soon become captain and lead their expedition. August nodded, introduced himself, and, with a restrained smile, remarked that he wouldn't disturb them. He wished them luck in their endeavors before continuing his business. June was completely shocked by his behavior. He left so abruptly that she didn't even have time to say anything. It was so unexpected that she couldn't understand what had happened. Meyer, noticing her surprise, said that August always behaved this way. He added that this man never created unnecessary problems and advised her not to worry about it. The girl had flown in for her own reasons, though she didn't particularly want to. But the situation itself struck her as odd, and it made her a little uneasy. She couldn't figure out what exactly was bothering her. She asked how the gentleman had figured it out, and he replied that it was written all over her face. This was quite unexpected, and she was slightly surprised by his insight, although she herself hadn't noticed anything special. But the girl, a little wary, remembered she had her back to him. To this, the gentleman joked that all the information was written on the back of her head, which left her slightly perplexed. He remarked that perhaps this happened only to her, or perhaps to everyone. She considered his words, unsure how to interpret such a joke. Then the gentleman asked her to stop sulking and inquired why she had come. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity in it, as if he expected something special from her visit. At that moment, the girl realized she hadn't come empty-handed, but with something to offer. She remembered her goals again and decided to speak her mind directly. She approached the captain with a proposal she hoped would interest him. It was an important step, and she felt she needed to act decisively, seizing the opportunity. The proposal concerned personnel renewal and improved training. She believed these changes could significantly improve their performance and overall results. The gentleman noticed that the captain didn't seem particularly comfortable discussing such matters. Apparently, he wasn't thrilled with her interference in matters he seemed accustomed to and familiar with. Nevertheless, the girl had already decided to begin fulfilling her duties, even though she hadn't yet been officially appointed. This fact didn't bother her, and she was ready to act immediately. She confidently declared that if she could do anything to improve the situation, she would do it without hesitation. The determination in her voice left no doubt about her intentions. Before her official appointment, all her actions might seem like interference, but there was little time to think. She understood that every step was important, and the moment could not be missed. The girl decided she needed to inform Mayer of her intentions. Right now, at that moment, he was looking at her like a lion looking at its prey, which made the situation even more tense. But there was no need to be afraid. She understood that she needed to clearly state her position and provide a worthy answer to all possible questions, without losing confidence in her abilities. The girl confidently stated that the Dark Knight consists of 3 main groups. The first group is currently actively preparing for battle with the powerful Demon King, focusing their efforts on strategy and training. The second group serves as a backup for the first. They replace its members when they are temporarily absent, ensuring constant readiness. This is a flexible and important part of the structure. The third group consists of newcomers who haven't yet received sufficient training, but they have the potential to become part of the first two groups in the future. Their job is to learn and train. Typically, high-level dungeons are tackled by the first and second groups, as the third group can barely handle the easier ones. This creates problems because their potential isn't fully utilized. The girl explained that the third group is just as large as the first two. There are too many participants there who aren't yet ready for the serious challenges, and this makes the work difficult. The gentleman asked if she was suggesting reducing its numbers, but she explained that wasn't the issue. Those who lacked willpower needed to be weeded out, and the weak. Many of those who joined the third group did so merely to profit from the reputation of a successful expedition, without having serious intentions or the necessary fortitude. It may sound harsh, but that's the message the girl was trying to convey. The gentleman didn't find her words offensive. He agreed there was nothing wrong with it and invited her to sit down. There were times when Fabian's expedition surpassed the Dark Knight in results, and their successes did not go unnoticed. They paid close attention to detail and strategy, and it paid off. During that period, they focused exclusively on mastering high-level dungeons, which is what allowed them to achieve such success. It was precisely this approach that allowed them to outsmart the Dark Knights. Therefore, she believes it's worth continuing this strategy, as it's already proven effective. As always, she provided accurate information about all the new dungeons. June Cadencia shared her thoughts only with Fabian, especially regarding the expedition. She thought they were blessed with something, but Mayer informed her that everything would soon change. Mayer and June knew their situation in the dungeons was dire, and they knew that whoever was faster and could protect them when they needed to would be the one who mattered. Having more people on the team was crucial to the expedition's success, as it increased the chances of success. June was confident their plans were unfolding as they had in the first round. Fabian was interested in what exactly she was talking about. It was an important moment for the entire group, but June couldn't reveal all the details, as much was still unknown. Each new stage of the game was unique, and June understood that even the great battle of the Holy Devil could be a little easier, since characters inherited skills from previous rounds. But with each passing dungeon, the difficulty increased. The external circumstances grew increasingly dangerous, and June understood that they must be prepared for any challenge. Fabian didn't know the whole picture yet, but June couldn't tell him all the secrets either because many things were still unclear, and it was hard for her to share everything at once. She assured Fabian that he no longer needed to worry about getting ahead of her in these matters. The main thing was to focus on the upcoming battle with the Demon King, and nothing else mattered. The captain had to carefully consider how to make the Dark Knight even stronger, as his strength was crucial in this situation. But how to achieve this goal? He began to doubt, asking himself questions. Did everything the girl had suggested really make sense? He asked her what exactly she had meant and how it would affect the situation. The girl realized she was lucky he'd agreed to listen to her. She explained that if he got rid of those who had lost their will, the Dark Knight's power would increase significantly. These people are like rotten tangerines, which, if left alone, will ruin everything around them. If they aren't eliminated, it will lead to the destruction of their entire structure and future plans. At the moment, all efforts were focused on closing the dungeons, but when preparations for the battle with the Demon King begin, the talents may lose their will due to the influence of these rotten tangerines. That's why the lady believed that even the Dark Knight would need a personnel overhaul to avoid further problems. This was an important step, and it couldn't be delayed. The gentleman countered that it would be quite difficult to separate them. It would take a long time. After all, such changes don't happen quickly. They need to proceed carefully. However, the Dark Knight didn't have much time. If they tried to make changes abruptly, they would face intense discontent, which could lead to even greater chaos. So the lady had an idea. She suggested finding talented individuals who could be useful to them. Among them were tangerine people, who could be of use at the right moment. She spoke about the importance of developing unrecognized talent, as this is the only way to strengthen her position, and her remaining captain will be a decisive factor. If the chosen candidates take the position at the top of the Dark Knight, she will demonstrate her worth as a leader and prove that she is capable of handling this responsible position. And only then will her influence and status be strengthened, and it will become clear that she deserves this role, and that it was not by chance that she found herself at such a high level, earning respect and trust. The rumors will gradually fade, and there's no point in turning to Mayer for help. He might not even pay attention to the gossip, as his intervention could only make the situation worse. In fact, he may not even be aware of these rumors. He's interested in other matters entirely, and such talk is of no consequence to him until it begins to threaten serious matters. He most likely doesn't care about public opinion or his personal honor, so he may not even take the rumors seriously, especially since the accusations concern her relationship with such a person. He expressed interest in how exactly she was going to deal with such a challenge, with the task of correcting the situation and increasing her importance in the eyes of others, to which the girl replied that there would be no easy solutions here. All that remained was decisive action. There was only one way to achieve the desired outcome in this difficult situation. Returning to reality, the gentleman noted that he likes this method. He sees in it the strength and determination he values in people who are capable of doing everything possible to achieve a goal. He's confident that much will change once she officially joins their ranks. He expects her actions and approaches to influence the overall picture and bring about positive change. He believes she should be given a chance and allows her to try without putting obstacles in her way. This is his way of supporting her, allowing her to pursue the direction she chooses. The girl was very grateful for this opportunity, and the gentleman assured her that he would provide her with all the necessary rights so that she could act at her own discretion without unnecessary restrictions. June Carentia could summon him if she needed it, and he was ready to help her. It was her right, and she had no doubt in her ability to exercise it. However, she knew that if she did this, the rumors would continue and the situation would get worse. It could affect her reputation, and she didn't want that at all. The gentleman told her to ask Vince, the butler, for equipment if she needed anything. She could get everything she needed for preparation, no questions asked. The vice captain had the right to do everything, including deciding who'd be given a chance to live and who wouldn't. This gave her considerable power, but also enormous responsibility. It was the leader's choice to decide whether to risk one life to save others. For example, whether to try to save one person when the entire group was at risk. In a dungeon, you never know what might happen or how a situation will play out. But she'd already received the basic permissions, and now all that remained was to decide whether anything else was needed. The girl replied that this was quite sufficient, as she saw no need for further clarification. Everything she needed had already been said. He suddenly remembered something important he'd almost forgotten about. He needed to take care of one last detail, something he couldn't afford to overlook. He would send one person with her, and she was absolutely required to take him with her. This was a mandatory condition which he considered essential for her safety. She assumed that this man would accompany her for supervision, although in reality she had no intention of doing anything that required secrecy or mystery. He added that if she helped kill the Demon King, he would not refuse her support in the future. This promise was important, and she had to remember it. June could ask whatever came to mind and receive answers. He was willing to give her full information if it would help her make decisions. The girl promised to do her best, knowing that great expectations were placed on her. She had to justify the trust he had placed in her. A new path for the Dark Knight had been chosen, and rumors of her activities began to spread much faster than she expected after she took office. The reaction to her choices was mostly negative. People couldn't understand how a support mage could choose such talents. This raised many questions. They especially didn't understand the selection process. They didn't want to take any risks, since even in a challenging dungeon, you could die if you made a mistake. It was a completely expected reaction. But she had come specifically during lunch to meet someone worthwhile, hoping for a constructive conversation and understanding. However, she wasn't quite sure where everyone had gone. The search and training of talent had been a complete failure from the very first day, which worried her somewhat. She began to worry, as it seemed no one was there. This was strange, considering she had searched long and hard for them but still hadn't found them. No one came looking for her, which only increased her anxiety. She continued searching, hoping that at least someone would show up, but it was all in vain. She was in complete shock, unable to understand where everyone had gone. There was not a single trace, not the slightest hint of other people's presence. She thought they were just hiding to make fun of her, as if everything that was happening was some kind of evil prank that she couldn't handle. She wanted to meet with everyone in person to sort things out. It was important to her to understand why no one was approaching and what was going on behind her back, but they chose to ignore her and talk behind her back, lacking the courage to approach her directly. This didn't sit well with her, and she was ready to take action. She believed that if someone had already started talking, they should continue and do so openly. She wanted to hear the truth and receive answers directly. She didn't care that things would be difficult. She was prepared for challenges, but she believed that nothing was impossible if she decided to go all the way. She decided to combine the captain's information with her skills to make the right choice. It wasn't easy, but she was ready to get back to work. She felt like she was back in the days when she'd enthusiastically played her favorite games. Memories of that time began to flood her, as if she were a child again. She hadn't tried her best in a long time, but now she decided it was time to put in the maximum effort. Now she was going to do everything right and leave no mistakes. Axion heard talk of a support mage called the Ghost, and was immediately intrigued. He couldn't figure out where this strange nickname came from, but it intrigued him. They said she seemed to catch people when they came to eat, and that her actions seemed excessive and strange, almost abnormal. This is what caused people to be perplexed. However, Axion still didn't understand what exactly had happened, why they started calling her that. The mystery intrigued him more and more, and he decided to get to the bottom of it. He decided to take a look around and after a while found her. June was sitting alone in the corner, and he immediately realized there was something strange here that had caught his attention. He noticed her strange smile and began to suspect that this was the ghost they were talking about. He was sure there was something mysterious about her behavior. He approached her to find out what was going on and asked why she was sitting there alone and if everything was okay. He was worried that she might be unwell. June, a little embarrassed, replied that she had simply been busy working and hadn't noticed him. She also explained that such moments happen when she's absorbed in work. She smiled and added that she was indeed strange at times, but only when she spent too much time on one task. It was a habit of hers. Axion was surprised, but the girl remained enigmatic. He couldn't understand how she managed to continue training newcomers and still remain so cheerful. She explained that she sometimes worries about many things, but she doesn't let these emotions take over. She tries not to be sad, even if everything is boiling inside. This is her approach to life, especially when she was entrusted with such important responsibilities. She thought carefully about where to invest her efforts and resources. This was her responsibility, and she took it seriously. Axion was a little surprised by her calm and reasonable demeanor, but June understood well that her duties weren't the worst part of her job. There were other challenges too. He said she appeared to have documents, but he believed he needed to see her in person to be completely sure. That was the only way to understand her abilities and capabilities. It seemed like everyone was avoiding her, but the girl confidently declared she had a method. According to her, they could hide for as long as they needed without fear. He suggested she might be some kind of psychic, but she confidently said that even for her that was too difficult. The task was far more complex. It wasn't just a dream, but something very similar. She explained that they could run as much as they wanted, but they would still be caught in the end. Whether she sees them or not is irrelevant. They have no choice, and sooner or later they will face the inevitable. She also noted that everything would be as she decided. However, Axion began to worry, sensing that something might go wrong and they wouldn't be ready. But the girl didn't quite understand what he was talking about. He had said that problems could arise if they weren't disciplined and continued training. If their attitude was already like that at this stage, he doubted they would be able to carry out orders properly. This was a very serious matter for the entire group. It could truly be dangerous. No one knew what might happen in the dungeon, where they would face the most unexpected difficulties. And the situation could escalate at any moment. They could turn against her if they didn't carefully monitor their actions and make decisions without emotion. The girl thought that was exactly what he was talking about. She knew that if they weren't careful, they would soon find themselves in an even more dangerous situation. He felt he'd been too careless this time. He hadn't considered all the possible risks, and now he was worried about the team, realizing they could make a mistake. She said she would accompany him if necessary. It was important to her to be there, to support him, and to keep him on track, despite the difficult situation. Since even Mr. Axion's words cast doubt on their readiness, they began to worry. This meant they lacked confidence in their actions. He once said something similar. Perhaps the captain was worried too. At times like these, everyone in the group finds reasons to worry, and everyone turns to each other for support. In the dungeon, there is only one law: the strong destroys the weak. No matter how powerful magic seems, it will not protect against someone more powerful. Even the most powerful mages can become defenseless against a monster. Strength often loses its meaning when faced with a true threat capable of tearing one apart. Escape is impossible. Contemplating one's own fate isn't scary, but thinking about what will happen to those who can't fight becomes unbearable. She'd probably only been to the dungeon once in the Dark Night, But that wasn't a reason to doubt it. In moments like these, she definitely felt experienced. Time changed her, but good skills didn't emerge overnight. To survive and win, she needed experience, which she lacked, and there was little time to accumulate. Becoming an expedition leader was no easy task. Even with her strong skills, she still had to prove herself worthy of the role, but she was certainly no novice at this. Yurka noted that she was grateful to Axion for his concern. But everything was fine. She knew she had a trump card that could change everything at the right moment. Oksana was a little puzzled and asked what she meant. There was genuine interest in his voice, though nothing was said explicitly. A support mage can neither attack, nor defend, nor heal. However, she does have one power, holy devotion, which she uses at her own discretion. The magic that saved Fabian's arm was a spell capable of saving a comrade. It had the power to pull them out of trouble, even if it required personal sacrifice. The target of this magic didn't necessarily have to be her alone. It was a power that could transfer pain and wounds to another, meaning the life of her comrade could become a priority. Transferring wounds to another is a form of protective magic. With it, she could protect herself from threats, from her own comrades who were unaware of her power. If anyone found out about this magic, everyone would stay away. So she decided it was a secret she had to keep, otherwise her power would become a burden. She admitted that if she spoke about this, she wouldn't be able to use her trump card to its full potential. Then this power would lose its effectiveness, and trust in it would also weaken. Axion was upset and asked the girl to tell him what was going on. However, she still replied that it was her personal secret, which she didn't want to reveal even to him. Hearing this, Axion felt a little embarrassed, but the girl still believed that they needed to maintain some distance, not revealing all the secrets to each other. Axion noticed that her self-confidence made him feel calmer, as if she knew what she was doing, and this suddenly gave him a feeling of confidence. The girl added that the captain would soon select someone for the mission and everything would be fine. However, Axion asked whether there were other possibilities besides the two mentioned. He said he would definitely let her know when a decision was made. She assumed it would be him, and so he was the one who came to her with the proposal. But the guy himself noted that if it were him, he would not offer help. And if the choice did not fall on him, then he would have to look for a more suitable candidate. Axion trusted the captain because he knew he would select the most suitable person for the mission. The lady agreed with his opinion, considering it a reasonable approach. She expressed hope that the choice would be made in favor of someone who would truly be useful to their cause and would be able to effectively cope with the task. August told her to take care of him, keeping in mind the importance of his role in their case and his special needs in the process. The girl was puzzled and couldn't understand what exactly he meant by demanding such care from her. It wasn't entirely clear in the context of what was happening. She thought the captain had directed him to her, but she still couldn't understand what exactly they were talking about or how it related to her tasks. The gentleman confirmed her suspicions, but she could not believe it. It was so unexpected and unusual for her. It was the expedition's chief priest, Mayer, who possessed incredible endurance and strength, which made him indispensable in difficult situations. Therefore, he did not need a priest to restore his strength. But at the same time, no one could replace Augustus, since his role was unique. June Carantia simply wanted to train new recruits. If this was part of surveillance, she couldn't understand why she would do it, especially considering she could have pulled someone back from the brink of death. She asked him to take care of her. His mere presence had worn her out, though she tried to restrain herself, knowing that he wasn't feeling so well in this situation either. They were closely watched by other knights, lurking in the shadows, all waiting for the right moment to intervene or simply gain information about what was happening. All the knights believed this was the only way to achieve their goals. It was a carefully thought-out strategy, and they hoped everything would go according to plan. Augustus addressed those standing behind the wall. His words were directed at those hidden from view, adding tension and mystery to the situation. He asked if they had anything to say. His voice was calm but tense, as if he were expecting something important to say that might influence their next steps. However, as soon as the father realized the situation was getting out of control, he hurried away. He claimed nothing important had happened and left the scene. Public opinion about training changed when Augustus joined in. His presence boosted confidence, and training no longer seemed so dangerous and risky. June hadn't been entirely confident in her own abilities, but with him by her side, she felt much better. At least she knew her chances of survival with him were significantly higher than if she were alone. She had only one life, and she knew it was impossible to resurrect someone after death. There was no trap that could bring back the dead, and this worried her. Only those who had reached level 99 could learn such magic. But at the moment, no one could surpass Mayer, who was level 80. Level 99 gives a person such abilities that he can become almost a god. But this does not always mean superiority in situations that require other qualities. However, even without resurrection magic, August was always strong and could bring considerable benefit in a variety of circumstances, confirming its value. He was always by her side, whether in the dining room or in the corridors, accompanying her in her daily activities and helping her not only physically but also morally. His presence was always conspicuous, and this often complicated situations, especially when it was necessary to act covertly or unobtrusively. Some aspects of documents or information had to be verified independently, as it would be extremely unwise to trust everything automatically. It might be better to become an archer than a swordsman, as they seem to be much more suitable for most tasks than swordsmen. Thanks to August, she had the opportunity to closely monitor what was happening, although he himself could not understand why this process of observation was so important to her. The girl noted that the tangerines they saw were unusually fresh and beautiful. But this is just a metaphor to describe the situation. He couldn't understand what tangerines she was talking about, since she was simply using the image to describe people, not fruits. Once here, she realized that she was meeting many more talented people than she expected, which opened up new horizons and opportunities for her. August, seeing her reaction, thought that she meant that these people were not only strong, but also fresh, full of energy and readiness for new achievements. The girl decided that she would need to check the selected candidates more thoroughly, and it seemed that they really did a good job today. However, she suddenly learned that one of them had died, and this news stunned her, becoming an unexpected turn of events. She couldn't believe it, especially when the maid told her that he had died in the dungeon and quite recently, leaving everyone in shock. It was a terrible loss, especially when she was told he was only 17 years old, and she couldn't understand how this could happen. The Dark Knight is not just a few squads, but an entire army, organized according to every possible standard. It is a powerful force in which every soldier has a role. The remaining groups typically focus on quickly closing the dungeon. These teams are highly trained and have experienced fighters, so as not to overload the newcomers. Since he had become part of the Dark Knight, he shouldn't have died so easily. She had a premonition and asked a maid to deliver a report on the raid's progress. The maid assured him that she would bring him information soon, and August added that death in the dungeons was not such a rare occurrence, and many perceived it as inevitable. The lady was aware of this, but her expeditions were usually better prepared. They avoided major losses, which was common practice for experienced units. That's why the death rate here was always lower than in other groups. August was surprised to learn that the lady was so well informed about this. The lady noted that this was no secret at all. The entire army knew how carefully they were trained and how important it was to be prepared for the dangers of the dungeons, where there was always risk. When the maid brought the report, the mistress carefully read all the data, not missing a single detail, in order to understand what exactly happened during this raid. She soon realized what the problem was. There were some discrepancies that immediately caught her attention and made her question the group's safety. She instructed Maria to notify her of any changes in this group. This was important to keep abreast of the situation and be prepared for any unexpected developments. August noticed that something was clearly bothering the lady. He sensed her tension, but he couldn't figure out what exactly about the report was bothering her. The girl tried to reassure him, explaining that this was just a normal group with a normal mortality rate, everything was as usual, and such cases were to be expected. She emphasized that even the death rate here is lower than in some other groups. However, there was one important moment that changed everything and made her worry. She wasn't interested simply in the number of dead, but in how they died. This was more important than any numbers, because the details revealed the true causes. August couldn't figure out what exactly was so special about these deaths, so he decided to personally examine the scene where the events occurred to understand and see the problem for himself. Now, it seemed, he was beginning to understand what was going on. If a group encountered problems during preparation, its members were doomed, and this was inevitable. This isn't surprising, but it's not the entire squad that dies at once, just one person at a time. This adds to the strangeness of the situation, creating even more questions. What's particularly alarming is that those who joined later don't notice this. They simply look at the overall metrics and ignore the finer details. This seems very suspicious, I need to report this to her ladyship, even though there's no proof yet. Everything that's happening seems strange, but we need to proceed with caution. If they don't understand the gravity of what's behind this, the situation will only get worse. We need to catch every participant to expose what's going on. The Blue Flame Squad's leader is the spearman Viffer, and there's another strange detail that's haunting them. It's some kind of hidden threat that needs to be uncovered. It was too early to tell the captain about this, so she decided they would simply observe to gather more information. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. The knights were shocked to hear the vice-captain's cry. His voice was filled with alarm, causing uneasiness among everyone. This was a sign of trouble. The lady was on the verge of exhaustion, her patience nearly exhausted. She had made her choice long ago, and this man was now in the Blue Flame, creating new problems. Sevilla Ventus is the youngest member of the Dark Knights, and her wind magic makes her special. However, her age and inexperience could be a problem, though she's clearly no ordinary rookie. She pays special attention to this child because he possesses a gift the others lack. His wind magic abilities represent a significant asset to the squad. The attribute Jun used was ideal for archers. If Axion also helped, the combination would truly be devastating. With the right training, he will be an incredibly useful ally, and his abilities will greatly enhance the team. The reason she didn't hear his name in the first round was most likely because he died when he first discovered his talent as a mage. Apparently, he fell victim to the Blue Flame Squad's connection, which led to his death. But she won't be able to help him now, because the performance ceremony is scheduled only for next week. Now she is a stranger to everyone, and any attempts to interfere in the affairs of the expedition will be regarded as an abuse of authority. Although, perhaps something will happen to Seville in the dungeon this week, and her intervention will become necessary. June remembered the captain's words that if she helped destroy the Demon King, she could ask him for any help. At that moment, she realized that she had no choice and needed to act to achieve her goal. She came to the captain, and he asked why he should care about the fate of Seville Ventus. The lady explained that she had great magical talent that was worth developing and protecting. Mayer seemed unaware of this and asked if June had realized this through her ability. The girl replied that she was not sure that the group was actually sacrificing this person, but the gentleman noted that her reasoning surprised him. She still hasn't found any evidence, but if they remain the same, it could lead to the loss of a valuable person. She understood that it would be impossible to fix this, and the gentleman expressed doubt that the cause of death could be due to insufficient skills. Mayer remarked that it was strange that it was precisely those with talent who died, and this worried him greatly. He didn't understand who was behind this, and what they should do in such a situation, where there was clearly a hidden threat. Mayer abruptly stated that it was too dangerous and did not agree with the proposal, believing that it would be better to send someone else or forget about it altogether. The girl was shocked by his reaction. After all, he himself asked her to report everything, and now he reacted so harshly. He acts as if he doesn't care who she is. Whether she's vice captain or someone else, he doesn't care, and he shows no respect for her status. She's sure that even a 14-year-old child could die in such conditions, but she believes it's too cruel to remove Sevilla from the group. It's not an easy decision for her. However, there's no guarantee that even the strongest flame won't affect his condition. Fire can be dangerous for anyone, even the strongest, and the dungeons are always full of hidden dangers. Every move can be fatal. This place doesn't forgive the slightest mistake or carelessness. She'll likely decide to go there without proper preparation because her life is so precious to her. But there's a glint of determination in her eyes, and she's ready to take the risk. It seems she already has a concrete plan for how she will proceed. She is clearly preparing to overcome all possible difficulties. The lady confirmed this, and he stated that in that case he had his own conditions for her that would need to be met in order to move forward. The girl was surprised when he voiced his demands. She didn't expect everything to depend on any conditions on his part. In her understanding, base and territory are two different concepts. Although she sees something similar in them, these concepts are not actually identical. For her, owning a territory means managing the people who live there, their destinies, their lives. That's what matters to her. It's not just land, it's lives. Owning a base, on the other hand, means managing the surrounding dungeons, as well as all the dungeons discovered in the surrounding area. This requires greater control. The number of dungeons and their area are limited, unlike the number of groups, so some owners take a commission for clearing them, giving it to other expeditions. Therefore, expedition owners don't always close dungeons themselves. Sometimes it's much more profitable to hand over clearing rights to another group for profit. Because of this, many groups are trying to gain control of the base, but this does not apply to the Dark Knights. They already have a huge base in Noctinteria. Even if other groups wanted to get into one of the bases, no one would dare demand a commission from them, since the Dark Knights have enormous power and influence. The Dark Knight was always the one to help navigate the most difficult and dangerous dungeons. He was a master, capable of conquering levels no one else could. So, the Blue Flame group always had something to do. Their next raid promised to be no less dangerous and interesting than the previous ones. It was all strange, but the echoes of the past hadn't even faded yet. The problems hadn't disappeared, and every step brought them closer to an inevitable resolution. Everything had happened exactly as she'd predicted. Her plan had been sound, and now all that remained was to take the next logical step, one she'd long considered. An agreement had been reached with the gentleman, and now her task was to strictly follow the outlined plan without deviating from the intended line. When she met a man, she was surprised by his words. He thought the vice captain would only steal from the newcomers, unaware of the full truth of her intentions. She understood that she would need to join another group to move forward. It was inevitable, given the circumstances and her own goals. The man she encountered turned out to be the leader of the Blue Flame, Vifera. He claimed that Vifera had once been a knight, which added to his authority in their eyes. He earned the respect of his peers, but he hid this part of his character. He usually kept his soft side under wraps, remaining firm and decisive in his actions. The lady stated she had no intention of interfering, but her wishes were different. She wanted to gain experience before assuming full authority over the position she sought. The man thought her ambition might not be the most wise. He believed that 1 or 2 raids wouldn't make her experienced enough for this world. The girl, in turn, confidently replied that the journey, no matter how long, begins with the very first steps. And this step was important to her, despite the doubts of others. He argued as much as he liked, but he still understood that she would follow her own path. And every step she took brought her closer to success, despite all the obstacles. Vifera couldn't understand why his group had been chosen for protection. They didn't have the resources to guard a support mage, but apparently the others had their own reasons for the choice. Blue Flames attack the dungeon, which is located on the easy to medium difficulty level. This is the perfect opportunity for the girl. She will definitely be able to survive in these conditions, but his hostility unsettles her. It's as if he can't bear her presence, leaving a strange feeling of dissatisfaction in the air, as if she were a stranger to him. He's clearly not thrilled about her being here. His gaze is filled with hostility, making her feel uncomfortable. This aggression is becoming a major problem for her. The dungeon isn't actually that difficult, and she's perfectly capable of handling it. But his behavior and constant hostility create unnecessary tension in the situation. She noticed that the commander was experienced, and this gave her confidence. He was no novice, and there was no need to be overly modest in such a matter, especially with such skills. The gentleman asked if the priest Augustus would go with them, but the lady in fact wasn't sure. The question seemed odd, as if it concealed something important, not entirely clear. Vafer, for his part, expressed doubt. He wasn't joking when he said they couldn't protect her. This underscores the gravity of the situation and the danger it poses for the girl. In the first dungeon, she was with Axion, the fire mage. Back then, they could quickly clear all obstacles thanks to his incredible power, but now that advantage is gone. They don't have those capabilities now, and she understands that this will be much more difficult to cope with. Without magical support, the situation is rapidly deteriorating, which is worrying. Clearing the dungeon while simultaneously worrying about her safety will be extremely difficult. Even with a high-level priest, it will be a real challenge. The situation is truly tense. She could die, and that's part of the risk she must accept. She must understand that the consequences could be tragic, and the chances of survival aren't always high. It's all clear as day, and she can't shake the feeling that this question is being asked only to show that no one is responsible for her death. If that's the case, then she's decided to defend herself. There's no need to worry about her, as she's confident in her abilities and ready to take responsibility for her decisions. If she overestimates her strength and dies, then she alone will be to blame. It is her choice, her mistake, and she accepts it, understanding that the consequences are inevitable. The gentleman was pleased with her decision and asked if she would take it back. The girl replied that she was even willing to write it down, demonstrating her firm resolve. In the dungeon, the man will be in charge, and the girl will be forced to obey his orders, without the right to make her own decisions. Everything will depend on his will. The girl, looking him in the eye, declared her readiness to fulfill the terms and swore to remain faithful to the agreement. This was important to her, and he accepted her vow. The man announced that they would set out early the next morning, wasting no time. He had already prepared everything, and there was no time for delay. She noticed the anger pouring from his eyes. It was obvious he wasn't hiding his mood. It was clear he was serious. But perhaps this is even better. Better than his empty smile, which would hide his true intentions. It's easier to provoke. Moreover, she could play on his aggression. This would speed up the process, and their dark plan would soon be revealed. She just needed to act quickly. The man said they needed to introduce them to new faces first, as the team had expanded. He wanted everyone to know each other. He explained that Captain June was famous, a prized mage who had become vice captain. Her reputation was vital to their goals. So the rumors went, and although the rumors were sometimes exaggerated, they needed to be shown to be trustworthy. They had to try not to let them down and lose face. His ironic grin was evident on his face. He clearly wasn't hiding his attitude toward what was happening. That spoke volumes. He also introduced Seville, who would now replace the archer Yaga, who had died in the previous raid. He was the newest member of their group. The boy asked Alan to take care of a particular area that needed attention. This was a crucial point in their further strategy. The answer was cold, and then the gentleman asked if the killer had any problems, anything that could affect their plans. The girl replied that everything was fine, but he asked again if there was anything wrong with him addressing her informally. He admitted that he always treated all his subordinates like that, but the Lord said that there was no need to worry. Everything would be fine. He could relax. She understood that sincerity was vital in their situation. To survive in the dungeon, you had to trust and be open about your intentions. He was glad she was quickly grasping the situation. They were all suspicious and prepared for possible exposure, but for now, that wasn't their problem. Now he was confident that everything would go smoothly, without major obstacles. He believed their plan would work if they acted decisively. During the mission, the man discussed how this time would be easier than previous ones. He felt they were better prepared. Last time, there were far more problems, and they made the task much more difficult. This time, it was easier than they expected, and more successful. In this team, they were really strong, which gave me confidence that they would cope with all the difficulties, and nothing bad was supposed to happen. In difficult times, people should support each other. This is undeniable, because it is mutual support that helps overcome difficulties. But the girl felt that this group could cope without her participation, so she decided to stay nearby to observe the situation and keep her distance. The man shouted that the support maid should stay away, as her presence would only hinder them and not help as she apparently intended. He couldn't understand how such a person could even become vice captain, because they were clearly all crazy here and acting completely illogically. The girl was worried that he would begin to suspect her true intentions, but perhaps it was even better than if he had understood everything right away. One glance was enough to understand that the relationship between them could change at any moment, and there was nothing unexpected about it. Mayer made it clear that he supported her, and they didn't even think about the consequences of their behavior, acting impulsively. The situation was becoming increasingly tense. The relationship was becoming increasingly rough, and this did not bode well. Now it was completely obvious that they would try to kill her right in this dungeon, and there was no point in hiding it. In a strange way, she felt better. Because when everything is so obvious, it becomes easier to act than when there are doubts. This betrayal was obvious, but what worried her most was the archer, Sylvia, who was showing aggression. She believed that expressing anger as openly as he did was wrong. It seemed too obvious and dangerous. If this continued, she was sure he would definitely shoot Vifera, and she hoped that he would manage to restrain himself a little. She turned to Sylvia, asking him to calm down a little so that the situation would not get out of control and they could move forward. Wayfarer shouted at them not to waste time, because every moment was important and they could not afford to hesitate. The man even pushed the girl in the back, which she perceived as an extreme display of aggression that went beyond all bounds. She was convinced that this was too much, and such an act could not be left without consequences. He mockingly asked why she was looking at him so intently, and what she didn't like about what was happening. The girl replied that the evidence was not yet sufficient, so she needed to wait a little before taking any action. She noticed that Sylvia looked very irritated. His anger was becoming more and more obvious, and this worried her. She didn't understand what was making him so angry because he had never shown such anger before. But she didn't want him to make any hasty decisions, because if he lost his temper, her plan could fall apart. If he couldn't hold back and control his emotions, she knew their whole venture could end right then and there. So she grabbed his hand and thanked him for supporting her so decisively and not leaving her alone. However, he pulled his hand away, causing her to lose her balance and almost fall, which was an unexpected and painful moment for her. Wafer smiled as he saw her fall, and the boy, in turn, was stunned by what was happening, not expecting such a turn of events. Farah couldn't understand how she had become so weak that she had fallen to the ground so easily. It seemed unnatural, since she had always been strong. June knew she couldn't allow herself to get angry at times like these. She needed to remain calm, lest she lose control of the situation and cause further harm. They continued walking, oblivious to her difficulty. They seemed unaware that anything was wrong with her, and they walked faster and faster, leaving her far behind. The girl couldn't understand why she felt like a failed instrument destined only to suffer. She tried to hold on, but her strength was ebbing. June's gaze fell on the raid's final end, and she felt a wave of relief. Having found herself on the brink of this ordeal, she knew it would soon be over. The vice captain couldn't stand by and do nothing. She had to intervene. The moment had come when it was her turn to act. All this time, June hid behind her comrades, trying not to attract attention. But the moment came when she had to stop hiding and show herself. The man told her it was time to do something useful. He could no longer tolerate her standing on the sidelines while everyone else was fighting and taking risks. She didn't quite understand what he meant when he spoke of her special role. The words confused her, and she couldn't figure out what he was talking about. Then the man said that she would soon understand what and how to do. He was confident that she would realize her importance to the group as soon as she was ready for action. He took up the blade known as Retribution. The magic emanating from this weapon was immensely powerful and had immediate consequences in combat. June stood up, feeling her body grow stronger. The attack-boosting magic had taken effect, and she now felt much more confident than before. She was wounded. Though the pain was intense, it was all part of the plan, as the magic supported her and increased her strength despite the injuries. She realized the magic the man had used was support magic, meaning her injuries only enhanced her combat abilities, preventing her from collapsing. The man asked her in surprise if she was surprised by his actions. He thought she should have expected this turn of events, but she didn't seem to be. June knew he was actually a support mage, though the documents didn't mention it. She understood that hiding it was part of his strategy. Though her information window didn't hide the truth, she understood that he hadn't revealed his powers intentionally. He didn't want his ability to influence the perception of his group. The man's gray hair wasn't unusual. It didn't attract attention, as such hair was quite common among mages. It took her a moment to realize what surprised her most. She thought it was the support magic, but in reality, she was shocked by his ability to conceal his actions. She couldn't believe that he was the kind of person who was willing to hide important information from his comrades and at the same time use them for his own purposes. It all seemed even stranger, especially given how he was able to manipulate the group. I wonder what Saint Marianne would say if she knew about this. The man calmly explained that his actions were not the result of malicious intent. He simply believed that magic was an applied science, and sometimes the truth had to be concealed for its effectiveness. He turned to the vice captain, asking if she realized the situation they were currently in. The situation was critical, and she needed to understand that. He assured her that if the spell's target suffered damage, it would become stronger, and that this would bear fruit. This was part of his plan, which was becoming increasingly clear. Based on what he'd already accomplished, his intentions were clear. Nothing was random. Every step he took led toward the specific goal he craved. The girl, looking at what was happening, realized that he was probably going to kill her. She sensed danger and immediately realized how the situation was unfolding. She said she now understood their plans precisely, and it didn't surprise her at all. She was prepared to accept what they had to do, but remained calm. She also asked him not to take everything that was happening as a personal insult. For her, it wasn't anything personal, but rather an inevitable step. She acknowledged that their unit was strong enough to carry out the task, but she didn't understand why they were being sent to suffer casualties. They could have accomplished the task without unnecessary losses. The man replied that no one had said the entire squad would participate in the battle. He meant that the decision should be made by those willing to sacrifice themselves. He added that in this case, experience points would be distributed among all participants. This allowed everyone to contribute to victory, albeit in different ways. The girl was completely shocked to hear that in the Great Battle of Holy Dialogue, experience for victory is awarded based on the contribution of each participant. This was a new approach for her. Vifera would hardly be able to defeat him alone, but if he sacrificed someone, he would receive a power-up and be able to take all the experience points for himself, leaving the others aside. She was shocked to realize he was willing to kill people for experience. It was unimaginable to her, and she couldn't understand how he could do such a thing. He said she was dumber than he thought and couldn't see things from a broader perspective. He intended to use her to grow his power and defeat the Demon King. He added that to defeat the Demon King, the minority must be sacrificed for the majority, and that's how the world works. It was a cruel but necessary decision. The girl wondered how many people he'd buried for such foolish reasons. She couldn't imagine the sacrifices he'd made for his ambitions. She recalled his actions in the first round and realized that this was nothing new to him. She began to understand why the other squad members were still helping him with this. She realized that the reward for closing the dungeon was not only money but also items from the bodies of the dead. This discovery was unexpected, but entirely logical. After dividing the spoils, the Vifera took the experience while the others received gold. Everyone knew this was common practice among such groups, but everyone kept their share. Now everything became clear. Their motives were quite concrete. Vifera didn't hate June Carentia, which came as a surprise to everyone. On the contrary, she even felt a certain sympathy for June, who was as much a support magician as she was. This strange feeling gave them a certain connection. Vifera realized their abilities were limited. For a long time, he couldn't understand how such weak mages could have any significance in a world where strength mattered. And then one day, having accidentally discovered a magical talent, he was delighted, but soon fell into despair, realizing that his abilities lay only in support magic. However, it later dawned on him that this was no accident. It was God's plan, and he began to perceive his abilities completely differently. The gods didn't care what methods humans used to achieve their goals. This discovery profoundly changed their view of the world and their own capabilities. So he didn't strive to become a powerful fire mage, as support magic was also useful. Its capabilities helped him develop, although not immediately. He was chosen as a hero precisely for this magic. However, many didn't understand how he could be useful in major battles, as his abilities weren't obvious. She couldn't do anything important that would help in the battle. However, when he grabbed her arm, she felt pain. That's when he realized her weakness. He noted that she had become captain through the same dirty methods that others had used, and this made him wonder about her true motives. Support mages couldn't use offensive or defensive magic, and even healing was unavailable to them. This made them unique, but also limited. However, they could learn techniques that went beyond normal fighting techniques, becoming masters of trickery and manipulation. This wide range of tricks and stratagems became their primary tool for defending the dungeon. All of this was indirect assistance, but extremely effective when needed. Mages who lack the ability to defend or attack are despised by everyone else. Their existence is essentially meaningless, as they can't help in either combat or defense. Even Vifera, a support mage who used her abilities to enhance her own power, couldn't find any merit in them. She was disillusioned by their uselessness. But despite their shared shortcomings, their similarities end there. Each has their own methods and goals, even if the end result is the same. They remain support mages. There's no justification for killing innocent people, and it's precisely these kinds of actions that render support mages useless and unrecognized. This is a harsh truth that's hard to accept. She warned him not to use her as an excuse for his actions. She wouldn't be content to be a pawn in someone else's game. That's not what she expects from her allies. She ended up in the squad thanks to her talent, and this stunned him. For a man accustomed to seeing people by other criteria, this turn of events was a complete surprise. He smiled, surprised at how she continued to deceive herself. Her words were so naive that they seemed spoken by a small puppy, unaware of the danger involved. But there was truth in her words. They were both support mages, and though he could have been more cruel, he gave her a chance, understanding that in such a situation, solidarity could not be abandoned. She had to choose. He grabbed the boy Seville's hand, indicating that her decision now had serious consequences. She faced a choice that would determine their fate. The man offered her two options: either become his ally and work at his side, or sacrifice herself for another. It was a choice that left no room for compromise. He clearly didn't think she was smart enough to grasp the gravity of the situation. He might have been wrong, but his certainty of her weakness made her doubt her own fortitude. If she chooses the first option, he will receive in her a faithful assistant who will serve him like a puppet, carrying out all his orders, even if they are cruel. And if she refused, he would show no mercy and simply kill them both? In his eyes, she was nothing more than a pawn, and he was ready to destroy her just like anyone else who stood in his way. She couldn't understand where he got such a high opinion of his own abilities and confidence in the situation. After all, if she revealed all his secrets, his reputation would be ruined. He noticed her hesitation and noted that she didn't believe his words. She was a newcomer just joining the squad, while he was an experienced knight with a reputation. He was sure no one would believe her. They would likely side with him, because his experience and status as a knight of good repute spoke volumes. She shouldn't try to play naive. She was furious, but he calmly told her she should think about it. It wasn't a bad option in his eyes. He was giving her a chance, but the offer carried a threat she couldn't ignore. She didn't have a good reputation within the Dark Knight, and her status as a master of support remained in the background. Her role was almost invisible, and she didn't even think she could ever become vice captain. It was hard to imagine. However, the man offered to help her use the blue flame. He was mistaken in thinking that support mages weren't so useful. In fact, they were far more important than many might have guessed. The man, realizing his mistake, admitted he was wrong. If trash could be considered useful, his words would have some merit. But in reality, his opinion proved superficial. When the girl expressed doubt about his words, she said he wouldn't have dared to say such a thing if he'd made the slightest effort to understand her work. Her knowledge of support magic didn't allow him to use it so carelessly. She understood that support magic must be applied with precision and care, not simply as a tool for destruction. It required far more attention than he could have imagined. Therefore, she declared that he shouldn't even try to claim that he could be among those who use such magic. She was ashamed of his underestimation of this important area. All eyes in the room were on him. The man, sensing the tension, said that she seemed to have chosen a path that would lead to her death. It was a threatening statement. The girl wasn't about to give in. She said that despite everything, he had agreed to act this way. Afterward, she felt intense pain and seemed ready to fall. The man said she wouldn't have to endure the lonely life alone, as an archer would be sent after her to complete the task. His words sounded like a death sentence, as if she were already doomed. The girl sharply objected and shouted that the captain wouldn't let it go. She was certain he wouldn't allow her to be treated like that, especially when her life was at stake. The man merely noted that the captain was only concerned about the dungeon's closure. He didn't care about anything else. Her fate wasn't that important to him. He added that she shouldn't worry about her future. Everything would resolve itself, and her life would no longer matter in the grand scheme of things. He was going to tell the captain that she'd been killed by monsters, as if it were any ordinary incident. It seemed like a simple and familiar outcome to him in such situations. But a few seconds later, when everything remained the same, the girl realized that nothing had happened. Everything was calm, and her life was still going on. When she opened her eyes, she saw that Sevilla had stopped the man. It was an unexpected turn of events. She couldn't understand how he had managed to intervene. The man couldn't believe the boy had dared to do such a thing. He was furious, but then he turned to June, trying to understand how it could have ended this way. He asked her if she understood the situation correctly, and whether she really intended to signal if her life was in danger. It all seemed completely ridiculous. In an instant, Sevilla transformed into Mayor. It was an unexpected transformation that further complicated the situation. The girl, feeling embarrassed, admitted she needed more proof. She was at a loss, unsure how best to proceed in this situation. A few days ago, in Mayor's office, the captain proposed an unexpected solution that stunned the girl. She couldn't believe it was possible. He told her not to argue and to prepare herself for the dangerous trials. Augustus, a priest, was limited in his powers over people. They decided they had to go into the dungeon together. It was the only logical solution if they wanted to survive and overcome all the threats. The captain was constantly busy trying to seal the dungeon, which was the cause of her shock. She hadn't expected such a turn of events. Now the girl didn't know who would protect whom. Everything was becoming confusing, and her thoughts were jumbled. Who would really be in greater danger? Judging by his determined gaze, the captain had no intention of changing his mind. She felt that with his support, she would definitely be safer in this dangerous place. She said the captain could do whatever he wanted. And though her words sounded calm, inside she was filled with doubt and anxiety. Viffer was completely perplexed. He didn't understand what was happening or why the captain was here. The situation was extremely confusing for him. The captain's assistants were equally confused. They didn't know what to do, and their minds were filled with thoughts about what had happened to the young man. They all couldn't believe their eyes, because what was happening was not at all what they expected. It was beyond their comprehension. She used transformation magic on the captain to make him assume Seville's form. This was essential for the successful completion of the mission. To use such magic, a person's consent was required, and the captain agreed without hesitation. He showed no signs of resistance and easily integrated into the group. However, problems arose. The captain turned out to be a terrible actor. They were lucky that little information was available about his character. Observant people might have noticed some discrepancies, but this time luck was on their side, and no one suspected a trick. Transformations of this kind were rarely used and difficult to study. It was a difficult but necessary step to achieving the goal. Every mage they encountered along the way should have noticed her magical support, but thanks to June's plan, everything was brought to life without any unnecessary complications. Thanks to June's skill in assuming the role of the transformed form, they were able to outsmart the Vifera. This was a decisive advantage. The captain claimed he had sufficient information about the man's crimes. He intended to use this information to achieve his goal. The man felt pain as the captain grabbed him. This was an unexpected and unpleasant development for him. The girl was completely shocked when she saw the captain's handprint on the man's body. This made her wonder what would happen next. It would have been best not to argue with Mayer at all, because his determination was unassailable. Every step he took was carefully considered. The captain turned to the Viffer and said that if he wanted to say anything, he should do it now. The time for reflection had already passed. Viffer couldn't understand why things had turned out this way. The situation seemed too unexpected, and he didn't know what to do next. He shouted for everyone to grab the girl. He was ready to do anything to strengthen his master and defeat Meyer. His cries grew louder. He ordered her to be killed, believing that this way he could strengthen his master and win this battle. He was confident that this was the only way he could defeat Meyer. He hoped the boost would be sufficient for victory, but that was far from the reality. June, in disbelief, began to think it was all just a joke. However, her intuition told her it wasn't true. He wanted to kill her to strengthen his powers and fight Meyer. But even with such a boost, his chances were extremely slim. Even with a redoubled attack, he remained weak, much weaker than Meyer, and couldn't match him on equal terms. His plan was doomed to fail. The captain smiled. He knew how strong Meyer was, and he couldn't contain his confidence. Nothing that happened surprised him. Viffer screamed, trying to stop everyone. He was panicking, realizing they could all die if they didn't make the right decision. He shouted again that Meyer was human too, and that the vice captain needed to be killed. She was just a support mage. She could be eliminated. He found himself in a state of agony, realizing his life was coming to an end. The captain, in turn, said he had nothing more to listen to. The girl approached him with a knife and noticed that he said that if he killed her, he would defeat Meyer. It sounded like a threat. He yelled at her, accusing her of bringing the captain. He was furious, thinking she was now pretending to be ignorant. He promised to take her with him to the next world. It was the last thing he could say before the situation spiraled out of control. The girl calmly replied that if all this was true, she had been waiting for it for a long time. She was ready to deprive him of his last hope, doing everything to make him lose all faith. She asked him if he thought he could kill her, and then she invited him to look at her closely, to see if there was more hidden in her eyes than he might have thought. Mayer was completely stunned by what was happening, and there was confusion in his voice as he began calling out to the girl, hoping that she would calm the situation down. He said this with alarm because he was sure that she had clearly gone crazy and there was something incredibly strange in her behavior that he could not understand. However, the girl replied that she was completely fine, in her right mind, and then Mayer asked her to show her hand to make sure that the wound she was talking about really existed. He looked at her hands, noticing no signs of wounds. However, a wound had appeared on Farah's hands, and that cast doubt on everything. The man, despite all his confidence, could not understand how such a strange event could happen, which he could not explain in any way. He was confused, unable to understand how this was all possible. The girl, not expecting him to understand, asked if he'd considered the idea that one person could use support skills. She used her holy sacrifice as soon as she sensed something was wrong. It was her decision, and she understood that her future was at stake. The new support spell she was about to cast couldn't take effect while the active spell was still active. Everything depended on how well she controlled her magic. The blade of retribution Vefera had used against her lost its power because the holy sacrifice had activated. This was a surprise to everyone. The boost he'd been counting on hadn't worked, and it was throwing him off balance. He didn't know how to fix the situation when everything had gone wrong. Mayor yelled at her, accusing her of doing everything wrong. But the girl, without losing her cool, pointed out that he was a support mage and should have realized that. She repeated his words sarcastically, which only made him even more angry. And he started yelling again, not knowing how to deal with it. Mayor turned to June and sternly told her not to try cutting herself again. He was concerned and didn't want her to do anything that would lead to further danger. The girl noted with a grin that she didn't have a hobby like self-destruction, and she had no intention of repeating it. But the captain still expressed doubt and said he needed to reconsider his opinion of her. The girl, showing no fear, replied that she could have said the same about him. The gentleman then added that she was much more rational than he had expected, although in reality she was still stupid. The girl calmly explained that her decision was the most rational one possible, but Mayer couldn't accept that cutting himself with a knife could be a sensible choice. He was against such an approach. She couldn't object to him, because her actions really were a small revenge against Vefera, who had so greatly interfered with her work. June Carentia was furious that one of the team members intended to further tarnish the already dubious reputation of support mages. She was deeply irritated and literally yearned to remove him from this role. The situation demanded an immediate solution. However, the captain realized they couldn't continue in this vein and had reached a dead end. They needed to decide what to do next. Suddenly, a man approached them and said his subordinates were merely following their commander's orders. That was all he could explain. He claimed that they could not help but listen to the command in the dungeon, and now in a panic he begged for mercy, not knowing what would happen next. Vefera, a woman from the group, intervened and said that they had decided to leave him here at this moment. The captain explained that the orders of the group's commanders must be followed, but only the orders of the expedition captain are of primary importance. Despite all this, they continued to beg for forgiveness, but the gentleman, remaining unperturbed, did not even listen to them. Having readily obeyed the order to kill an innocent, they ignored all orders, deciding their own fate without taking responsibility. Now they started shouting out ridiculous excuses, hoping that this would somehow change the situation and save them. The captain, taking up his sword, declared that it was up to June Carentia to decide what to do with them. He awaited her decision. The punishment could be either in the dungeon or outside. Either way, the choice was entirely hers. The girl, after thinking about it, decided that she could punish them publicly to improve discipline in the group. But she understood that this was unlikely to help. In the dark night, such a measure would likely have no effect. So she suggested drowning them in the river Styx, eliminating any witnesses. The idea was simple: no body, no case. Killing the witness, so as not to tarnish the entire expedition's reputation, was the most logical solution. The man, not understanding the seriousness of what was happening, could not believe that they dared to commit such an act, and tried to justify himself. Meanwhile, a fight with the Demon King awaited them, and they asked for another chance, hoping that it would somehow affect the situation. Mayor Knox, the leader of the Dark Knight, noted that some members of his squad seemed to not understand their roles, and he was ashamed of his subordinates. June Carentia reassured him, saying that her opinion of the captain and his actions had already been formed, and nothing could change it. After this, the captain said that since she was allowed to decide, then they would act according to her instructions, and this was the final word in the matter. Vefera, in turn, began to object, arguing that he had been chosen by God and therefore could not be treated like this. But the captain ignored it. Then the girl, after a moment's thought, asked if she should use magic on this man. The captain said that perhaps it was not necessary, but if she wanted to gain experience, he could use it. Magic enhanced one's powers, and experience depended on one's input. June Carentia knew that even a single spell could be beneficial. She couldn't pass up such a chance, especially since her level was too low for the second round. This was a chance to improve her skills. She soon decided to use enhancement magic, knowing that it would help her in the future. The strengthening magic was the same one she used last time, and its effect was as expected. It would definitely strengthen her powers. The man realized that she had used magic to analyze people's strength and asked how much stronger he had become after the spell. June Karenchia replied that her spell only gave him a 10% boost, which was a fairly standard result. It was a common buff that was used frequently in the game and was indispensable for healing, and it served to improve strength. Support magic had its own value, and the higher the base stats, the stronger the effect of the enhancement. June had a high level of magic proficiency and could use the enhancement 3 times in a row, which allowed her to increase her powers. She was ready to strengthen him even more if he needed it, but everything depended on his desire. The man, however, said he thought this was quite sufficient. He also noted that Vifera had mentioned a possible doubling of the amplification. June noted that the Blade of Retribution had certain limitations, but overall it was a powerful weapon. It only worked for the caster, and she partially understood why Vifera had acted as he had. She asked again what exactly such a significant enhancement meant, even if it was only a one-time thing. The gentleman explained that it was more powerful than drugs, and that it would be difficult to get rid of. Such actions are absolutely unacceptable in their world. They violate the rules, and the consequences of such actions will always be severe. He added that everyone must answer for their sins. When he said this, his words sounded as if Meyer were speaking about his own actions. Meyer had to fight the boss alone, which was a difficult test for him. He proved strong, but the price of victory was high. He was killed in one blow, and even June didn't have time to support him. It was too fast, and she barely had time to process what had happened. The power was astounding. June could hardly help but wonder if Meyer had perhaps sold his soul to the devil for such power. When they left, Augustus noticed their presence. He was glad to see the master and vice captain, which testified to his respect. June asked if everything was okay, and August confirmed that everything had gone according to plan and they had completed the task successfully. The gentleman said that everything had happened as they had expected. Everything had gone according to plan, and now they could move on. Augustus remarked that the use of St. Marianne's grace for such purposes left him dubious. He didn't even know whether he should grieve over it. He realized he was more concerned about the unfair use of his abilities than about death. The religion of this world was far removed from June's usual understanding. Many believe that people should use magic responsibly, as it is considered a blessing from the gods. However, this has been the subject of much controversy. Augustus's reaction was strange. The priest seemed unconcerned with the value of human life. He seemed far removed from simple moral norms. The gentleman said everything was fine, and now it was finished. They had successfully completed the task, and everything was back to normal. Priest Augustus was supposed to help treat the vice captain. She was beaten and cut, and her condition required immediate attention. June didn't understand what the problem was, as she felt fine. However, the captain insisted that she ignore her own words. The captain told Augustus not to forget that great things awaited them. He emphasized the importance of their future tasks and said that time was of the essence. He also warned that he didn't know what to do if the vice captain continued to take such risks. It could affect their plans. June didn't raise the issue. She considered treating a healthy person a waste of effort, but the captain was adamant in his decision. The captain said that her body was hers, but she should be a more responsible person and not risk her life, especially in such circumstances. Mayer is worried about her because he values her talent. He's invested a lot of effort in her and doesn't want to lose such an important member of the team. He asked again if she was listening to him, noting that they had a serious conversation to have when they returned from the raid, which she had not known about until now. June replied that she understood everything, and after clearing the dungeon, for which the stronger flame was responsible, a secret meeting was to take place at the Dark Knight's base. The captain told her the whole story about the Autumn Flame only after everyone had gathered for a meeting, and she understood the importance of what she had heard. He said that he was going to announce that Vifera had attacked his subordinates because he was jealous of their strength, and that it would be an important moment for everyone. Axion noted that this was actually close to the truth, but it was decided to hide the fact that Vifera was a support mage to avoid unnecessary stereotypes. Hiding this fact was to prevent any negative impact on everyone, especially June, as people might begin to suspect her magical abilities. Axion remarked that he did not understand how Vifera could have acquired such power at all, and he was left wondering why Saint Marianne had shown mercy to him. Augustus, however, said that the Lord works in mysterious ways, and then he began to think that if the goddess blessed people for their humanity, much might be different. He added that if Marianne had blessed everyone for their kindness, Axion would undoubtedly have received at least a drop of the magical talent that he clearly deserved. Axion replied that, of course, if people with good qualities received power, he would definitely be one of those who deserved the most magical gift. They started arguing again, and the red-haired man decided to intervene because he knew that if they didn't stop, the situation could only get worse. He said that if they wanted to argue, it would be better to do it with their fists, since the main strength of the Lober group was to resolve conflicts in battle. Axion asked him if he really wanted to fight this zombie, and Augustus replied that Saint Marianne would not approve of useless violence in such a situation. Despite Axion's magical gift, Augustus noted that he must learn to show at least a drop of gratitude for the abilities he had received without losing himself. He remarked that if the group had been selected based on loyalty to the goddess, only priests would have remained, and June, hearing this, was surprised by his thoughts. June replied that she felt that all August priests were capable of defeating almost any enemy, which added confidence to future battles. Axion didn't understand how it was possible to find 6 more such priests, because they were so powerful that it was almost impossible to create such cadres. June noted that it was indeed unlikely that such strength would be found, but she thought that in this situation she would still need to think about the right decision. Lauber noticed that she spoke as if she wanted to create a copy of Augustus, and June, smiling, replied that it was not such an impossible task, and she would think about it. The meeting was over, and they could go and rest, putting off all questions until tomorrow, when their strength would be restored and their thoughts clear. As they were leaving, the captain stopped June, and she, noticing his gaze, turned to him, feeling that something important was about to happen. The captain looked at her and remarked that if she had nothing important planned, he would like to offer her a drink in his office to celebrate her success. June was a little surprised that he asked her to have a drink at such a late hour and alone with him, because it was unexpected and a little tense. She felt embarrassed, because drinking with Meyer Knox alone at such a time was an unexpected event, especially with the captain of the Dark Knight. She was nervous, because this was not just a drink, but an evening in the company of Mayer, which was undoubtedly unusual and could make her feel awkward. However, she replied that she did not mind, and that, despite the late hour, she liked to drink, but 1 glass would clearly not be enough for her to fully enjoy it. Usually the problem was having a drink with the opposite sex at such late hours, especially if the situation remained unclear. But this was different. However, if the girl was with Mayer Knox, that was a completely different story, because his fame was known to many, and the relationship with him was different from the rest. His fame lay in his simplicity, and many girls, having repeatedly tried to win his attention, encountered failure because Mayer was not inclined to these games. Rumors that June is allegedly Mayer's lover seem unfair, especially considering that the problem has already become obvious and will surely be revealed even more soon. June drinks, and with each sip she opens up more and more to him, as if she is ready to confess something important that she has been keeping to herself for now. Despite this, June can drink quite a lot, and her body is accustomed to alcohol, so even such moments do not make her lose her composure. The main thing for her is to control herself, especially when she drinks, because this allows her not to lose touch with reality and not to do anything rash. But on the other hand, Meyer has expensive and high-quality drinks at her disposal, and she is not so stupid as to miss the chance to enjoy them at a time like this. In any case, she skillfully avoids stupid situations and cannot help but appreciate the opportunities that open up before her. He invited her into his office, and June realized that this was a sign that the conversation could continue, and she could open up even more. Mayer remarked that he had no idea that Vifera could be such a person in this situation, and this surprised him. Previously, Mayer always cared about his colleagues, and his attitude towards them was different. But with Vifera, everything turned out to be more complicated. June noticed that Vifer had changed a lot, and now it became clear to her why the gentleman did not know about his real condition. Perhaps her assumptions are correct, because his face does not change, but his voice has become more relaxed than usual, and she still wonders why he suddenly offered a drink. He apparently wanted to feel the spirit of alcohol, to talk to her, because, most likely, he does not have the opportunity to discuss such things with other people. Interestingly, June thought that Mayer didn't seem to care about Weaver at all, and didn't show strong emotions about what was happening to him. He had no doubt that his judgment was correct, but despite this, she realized that this situation was still important to him, and he was experiencing it more than she expected. June couldn't understand how the person who seemed invincible and the strongest to her could be so vulnerable in this situation. This was an unexpected discovery for her, and she felt her heart fill with pity, because she wanted to somehow comfort him. But the next second she realized that her worries were unnecessary. He grabbed her by the throat, and at that moment a powerful force separated her from the whole world. Everything that was happening reminded her of the moment when a person meets a wild animal, and she realized that one should not worry too much despite everything that was happening. June couldn't understand why he was looking at her so persistently, and this made her feel uneasy and a little worried. Mayor seemed to be waiting for an answer from her, so she hastened to say that the dungeon was too cruel a place for an ordinary person to survive in it. She didn't know what kind of person Vifera had been before, but it seemed natural to her that he had gone mad. The dungeon could easily break even the strongest. In this place, lives are lost, loved ones and comrades perish, and step by step a person gets used to the inevitable death, losing all fear of it. June Carentia had long ago learned to perceive the world as a game. Every day was like returning to a dungeon where she had to slay monsters and defend her life. In this world, she was accustomed to harsh rules and uncompromising decisions, without asking unnecessary questions. It's important to remember that not everyone who visits the dungeon crosses the boundary. A world where danger lurks at every turn is not as simple as it seems at first glance. Not everyone can make it through, and this is what separates the survivors from the rest. Temptation, no matter how it manifests, always confronts a person at some point, but it isn't necessarily as overt as a handshake. It's hidden and deceptive, making one doubt one's choices without providing clear guidance. And while it may not seem strange, that doesn't mean it's true. It's easy to believe something when everyone else does it, but it's important to remember that there's no truth in what's generally accepted as normal. June noticed that the gentleman also agreed with this. He said that actions that seem justified for self-interest cannot be forgiven. He himself acted as the situation dictated, but that doesn't make his actions righteous. Despite this, the choice had been made, and it was inevitable. He proved himself a weak man, and it was precisely this weakness that led to what happened. A confrontation with reality was inevitable, and there was no escaping it. June believed the gentleman shouldn't worry about what had happened. She was sure such moments could be endured without thinking. Why waste energy worrying when there were so many more important tasks ahead? It was obvious to her that the master would have to forget about this once it was all over. His place was among the great, and he would have to look after the weak, no matter how hard it was. Now his efforts were focused on surviving, despite all the difficulties. The gentleman continued to act with the last of his strength, despite the fact that it was extremely limited. But retreat was no longer an option. The only right decision was to focus on becoming stronger than everyone else. Strength came with every step, and June understood that only in this way could the master change his own destiny and the destiny of those around him. The gentleman noted that perhaps she didn't fully understand him. He claimed he wasn't as strong as she thought. His doubts were clear, and he hoped she would see him not as an ideal, but as a human being with his weaknesses. He also asked, what would she do if he didn't live up to her expectations? This was important for him, to know how she would react to potential disappointment, since he couldn't guarantee her an absolute victory. When June looked confused and unsure of what to say, he realized she still considered him strong. Her choice was tied to his strength, and that was obvious. But what if he couldn't be who she saw him as? Mayer added that she might want to return to Fabian. These words shocked June, and she didn't immediately understand what he meant. He was clearly trying to test her affection and the extent of her involvement in what was happening. At these moments, June felt she didn't understand what the gentleman was saying. He was again trying to delve into her thoughts, to find out how ready she was to be with him, and not with someone else who could become her support system. He was trying to figure out if she had feelings for Fabian. His words sounded like a test, and he knew all too well how cunningly fate could be woven, especially when it came to such a complex relationship. Reflecting, June realized that while they were close, their bond was driven by a shared purpose, not personal feelings. They didn't reveal their weaknesses to each other, though they were occasionally drawn together by their need for support. Initially, June thought it was all just a temporary situation, just an excuse to have a drink together, but she soon realized she was far more involved than she would have liked. He skillfully engineered the situation to force her to open up after she'd had enough alcohol. Everything was calculated to coerce her into confessing. She felt offended and wanted to know whether she would pass on his secret or not, but she was not ready to listen to him. She began to understand the reasons why Mayer continued to question her, trying to find out more about her intentions and feelings. Even though she had been betrayed, she remained loyal to Fabian, the hidden core of the Demon King. she still carried that heavy secret within her. She had to be careful with those around her because she knew that her usefulness was important to them, especially in the future. To succeed in her plans, she needed to earn Mayer's trust, and she was willing to do so. She remembered the captain's words that she was a bad actress, and so she decided to tell the truth, asking if he was making fun of her now. Out of disappointment, she was ready to return to Fabian. Anger was seething inside her. She could not contain her emotions. In a fit of rage, she shouted that she had only betrayed the expedition once, and he thought they were the same as people without loyalty. Mayer immediately replied that he didn't think so. His words were confident and calm. She noted that if that were the case, he would not be asking her such questions, and in fact he called her Fabian's doggy, and she despised this comparison. She couldn't stand it when they called her that, but she couldn't do anything about it. She continued to do the best she could while being part of the expedition, and didn't understand why everyone kept attributing such thoughts to her. The captain apologized for his words at their first meeting, asking forgiveness for his harshness. She replied that she was different from him in her loyalty, and therefore accepted his apology, expecting that such moments would help them become stronger. She was surprised why he suddenly started asking such questions. Perhaps he was sacrificing the expedition members, as Vifera had done. The gentleman said that the situation was completely different, but the lady confidently stated that it did not matter to her. The captain invited her to join the expedition, and she agreed, but after some thought, weighing the pros and cons, she chose the captain because his condition suited her, and they were already in the same boat, ready to go in the same direction. The captain had to defeat the Demon King if he wanted everything to go according to plan. He knew it wouldn't be easy. If the captain turns out to be not as strong as she thinks, she will not betray him, but on the contrary, she will make him stronger in order to help. The gentleman was stunned by her words, did not know how to react to it. Complete confusion was visible in his eyes. He even asked again if she really wanted to make him stronger, not believing that she was capable of such actions. He was doubtful, as it was hard to believe that a level 23 character could strengthen someone who was at level 80. The girl smiled, asking if he thought she couldn't do it, her gaze confident and even a little mocking. She was confident that it was possible, because she had already studied his characteristics and was ready to face his weakness. Knowing that Meyer was a ticking time bomb turning into a demon king, she always expected the worst. She said that in any situation when she's involved in a game, she always gives her best, sparing no effort. June Carentia was confident she could be the perfect backup for the captain, even if he suddenly decided he didn't want to fight the Demon King. She believed in her own strength. The girl was ready to support him, even if she had to act harshly. She would have simply sent him out to the yard and didn't think her name would go down in history. The gentleman agreed with her decision, but June began to doubt it. He fell silent, and she realized his silence was motivated by something more than simple agreement. He'd gotten what he deserved, but now he was in a daze. Everything that was happening around him seemed strange and a little uncertain. He was putting other people in awkward positions when he was drunk, but it was unclear why he was still holding her hand. It was difficult to understand what motivated him at that moment. June thought he might drink with her again, but she didn't mention it. After all, the alcohol was so good that it would be foolish to refuse. She was ready to meet him again. This drink was simply perfect, and refusing it would be a mistake. But doubts remained in her soul. Then the gentleman turned to her and said she was an incredibly strong person. He noted that her strength was evident in any situation, and this couldn't help but impress him. June was surprised that he spoke as if they already knew each other. She couldn't understand where he got such thoughts from, given that their meeting had been so recent. The gentleman continued that they had indeed met before and had noticed her talent from the very beginning. This was something unexpected for June. She hadn't expected such words. The girl was in complete shock, unable to understand how this was possible. He explained that he had rushed to save her because he had noticed her abilities back then. June still couldn't believe his words. He continued that he saw her in the first round, although she only remembered trying to kill him at that moment. He couldn't remember exactly which meeting it was. He'd overheard conversations with the Fabian expedition, and it had left a mark on his memory. They discussed choosing a dungeon, and it was unclear why June hesitated. One of them argued that they should target Reikyo, and they decided to move in that direction. Others believed the water dungeon wasn't the best choice. It had its own properties that conflicted with Fabian's magic, posing a danger to the entire group. June didn't understand why she decided that, but she calmly explained that there was no need to worry about the water. She was confident she could handle it if she raised the level. She thought her actions could level her up, and it didn't matter how desperate she was. The important thing was progress and self-confidence. She tried to convince her comrades that this wasn't a death sentence. But June knew that at level 60, a new magic skill would unlock, and that would change everything. He said that even if she reached level 60, it wouldn't change her abilities much. It would still be support magic, meaning her powers wouldn't be enough to fight demons. June, despite not leveling up, still had enough power to remain a valuable member of the expedition and assist in its tasks. The girl, noticing the concern, turned to Deco, reminding him that if June was so stubbornly insisting on her own, then there were probably good reasons for her decision. The guy, turning to April, expressed doubt, saying that if she continued to support June, she would not give in the end, but they had never made a mistake in following her advice. However, the guy was sure that their success in previous expeditions was more a result of luck and their personal talents, and not because of anything else. Fabian listened silently, and Deco added that, although there were no serious consequences, no one could boast that everything went perfectly. Difficulties always arose. Then, June turned to Fabian, reminding him that her suggestions were never unfounded, and now it was important to her that her opinion be taken into account and that they go to the dungeon she had spoken of. Fabian, however, was firm in his decision and declared that this time they would head to a different dungeon, despite the girl's insistence. June was clearly upset, her voice shaking as she tried to convince him that their decision wouldn't be as risky as he thought. April, in turn, supported June and tried to convince everyone to listen to her opinion, saying that her point of view deserved attention. After this, April couldn't stand it any longer and rushed after the guys, saying that they were behaving very rudely, not wanting to listen to others. Deco, responding calmly, asked April to calm down, explaining that this decision was made for the good of the entire expedition and not for personal interests. April was usually quite strict, and no one understood why she was so soft with June, considering her tough stance towards everyone else. Meyer, observing what was happening, noted that although Fabian was indeed choosing between two dungeons, in the end he made a firm decision to attack only one of them. Despite the silent support of the rest of the expedition, it was amazing to see how June did not give in and continued to protest against the decision made. He added that it should not be thought that he was spying on them, since they themselves were loudly discussing their plans, and he was simply nearby, listening. June remembered that usually when they went on an expedition, she stayed behind to observe the action, but in the case of this dungeon, things were different. The mage, who always tries to avoid arguments, was completely ignored this time when he tried to express his opinion, claiming that he knew nothing about the situation. The mage's opinion was not taken into account, but no one said there was anything wrong with it. However, the situation was tense enough to return to the discussion. At the time, he had thought that he had always wanted to work with her, but he had no idea that they would be brought together in such a situation, with such decisions and consequences. If you think about it, the expedition that attacked the dungeon that June insisted on was an important milestone that determined the future of their group. The expedition was bolstered by the presence of a dark knight and an artifact found in the Raikyo dungeon, which increased the participants' resistance to fire attacks. The Dark Knight, having mastered the artifact, had since used it for his own purposes, and now Axion could also use this powerful item in his battles. It would be useful for protecting participants from fire magic. Even then, Maya realized how useful this feature would be. He said that despite everything, she still had memories of the first round, and that it developed, especially after she became the vice captain of the Dark Knight. June was irritated, and he feigned drunkenness, trying to get her to open up by talking about his special relationship with the vice captain, whom he'd talked about so much. She didn't know that this included getting her drunk on expensive alcohol. She told him to never try to look at someone like that again, and that he had to understand that. The gentleman said he understood, and from that moment on, he trusted her completely. But it was a lie. He didn't reveal to her what the core concealed. From now on, they will enjoy showing each other their cards. Perhaps everything will come to light after some time. The girl said she was already getting ready to leave. He tried to stop her, stood up, but began to stagger, and she got scared. He could have fallen on her, and she said that judging by his condition, he needed to be put to bed. He should hurry and rest. But the gentleman said he would walk her to the door, and since he insisted, she agreed. She also noted that, in any case, she was grateful to him because they had drunk well today. He noted that she drinks well, his defeat completely and utterly. The lady said you reap what you sow. Incidentally, when they were standing so close, he seemed very tall. She felt a little awkward in this situation and was slightly embarrassed. Perhaps it was the lack of alcohol, but she would have liked another drink, noticing that his hair was falling apart. She wanted to correct them, but he grabbed her hand. She didn't understand what was happening and was very scared. He was also a little confused. The situation was completely unclear. June didn't even know what to say to him, didn't understand what was happening. She just wanted to fix his hair. The gentleman apologized and said that he was too sensitive. The girl replied that there really was nothing to worry about. This time, she definitely crossed the line. It really was absurd for a subordinate to touch his hair. Apparently, she really is drunk. She said she would say goodbye to him then, and the gentleman said goodbye to her. It seemed that he was tired of her. She was curious about the emotions with which he looked at her. But at the same time, she didn't want to know. That's why she found it until the end without looking back. The next day, news spread among the dark knights, and it felt like a shock. Blue lights became a symbol of the event. Everyone was discussing how this guy, Vifera, whom his comrades trusted, had betrayed them by turning against them at the most unexpected moment. His lordship was depressed, angry, and in disbelief. It was the first time anyone had seen him like this. Perhaps there were other circumstances to blame, but the situation was too complex to understand immediately. If they did fall out of favor, the consequences could be catastrophic, so they had to be careful. June thought it was just a hangover. She assumed his condition was nothing more than a consequence of the previous night's excessive drinking. At that moment, someone called her and she turned to look. It was Axion, and June was a little surprised by his appearance, not expecting him to approach. He said that after the meeting he heard her drinking with his lordship and specified that she shared this with him. June confirmed that they had only had one glass each, to which Axion remarked that this was important. It meant she had won his trust. The girl was a little stunned and said that she didn't know about it because it was all so insignificant and accidental. She explained that they were simply drinking, but Axion replied that his lordship would not drink with someone without a reason, especially alone. The girl realized that this was precisely why she poured herself a drink, not expecting it to have such meaning. He added that, despite the fact that they were drinking together, work with his lordship still continued to proceed as normal. Axion believed that this could be her chance, a chance to start a new life, and his lordship had no intention of stopping her at all. June felt a strange but pleasant feeling from Axion's words and replied that she did not need compliments and did not plan to accept his participation. He continued anyway, not understanding why she was so distant. Even the priest Augustus would join a special squad and develop her abilities. This squad was designed to improve and develop specific skills. Rumors of its creation began to spread during the talent selection process. June couldn't understand why Axion was so interested, but he clearly wanted to take the chance to become stronger and better in this squad. She said that the priest Augustus would go according to the captain's decision and noted his strength, but Axion assured her that he would be able to control him. June advised him to simply keep an eye on the Red Wolf squad to make sure everything went according to plan and without any unnecessary interference. Axion said that he had such a talent that he could handle several tasks at once without losing concentration. The lady reacted coldly to this and stated that he should concentrate and realize his full potential without unnecessary haste. Axion, somewhat upset, admitted that he thought his plan would work, especially if it affected her while she was hungover, when even her ladyship was prone to such a condition. He didn't think he had drunk too much, but the lady clarified that she had only been drinking in moderation without any unnecessary difficulties. Axion didn't quite understand what was happening, and didn't know whether such a reaction should even be taken as normal for an ordinary person. At that moment, Labor approached them and, intrigued, asked if she knew how to drink. He was surprised that their vice-captain possessed such skill. He was genuinely glad to hear this and suggested they have a drink together later if they wanted. He regretted that they hadn't discussed this at the meeting, but now Lober had brought it up first. Lober was of the Oak tribe, a renowned warrior in the Dark Night. She had excellent defensive skills that she had honed over the years, and if they got close, she would be able to help them further. Axion reminded him that it was better to be careful, because if he drank with his sister, it would end badly for him and he would suffer greatly. Lober laughed and, smirking, remarked that a true warrior of Great Logathan must know how to drink, like all knights. June realized she had come for a drinking buddy. There are really few people who love alcohol and know how to drink wisely. You can count them on the fingers of one hand. June, sensing the mood, said she liked to drink too. Lober, for her part, was certain the red-haired man would be just the man for the occasion. June added that Lober suggested they have a drink later, but she thought now was the best time. Lober agreed with this, but Axion expressed doubt and suggested that they stop, reminding them that she had been drinking with his lordship yesterday and was planning to do so again today. June noted that yesterday's alcohol was already in the past, and now was a new day, and Lober supported this idea, suggesting that they strengthen female friendship. Axion tried to intervene again and said that he would be with them to prevent them from drinking too much. In the evening, August could not understand what was happening at all and was clearly puzzled by what was happening. He asked them to explain this strange situation, because he had absolutely no idea what was going on. Lober, without hesitation, offered the priest a drink with them. Augustus was angry, for he was dedicated to service and disapproved of such entertainment. He reminded them that it was his duty to give thanks to God, and that such actions as drunkenness were a sin to which he could not but object. This was said with grave insistence, and Lober suggested ending the conversation there and at least tidying up the room a little. At this point, Axion was already very drunk, and suddenly they heard strange sounds that abruptly disrupted the atmosphere of fun. August expressed concern that June would fall under the influence of Sister Lober, believing it to be unsafe for her. He clarified that his sister only holds the position of vice captain of the Dark Knight and does not have much influence. June, surprised by his words, asked if he approved of her candidacy for vice captain. August replied that he saw no reason to revoke her abilities. He noted that he is not actually the one making the decision on her appointment to this post. It was the first time August had mentioned her name in the context of the vice president. He softened a little, and June felt relieved by his words. She was glad to hear his support. August added that the public would soon change its opinion about her merits and talents. June wasn't conceited by the blessings she'd received from Saint Marianne and continued to train diligently. He blessed her with the saint's name. Now June understood why Augustus always kept his distance. It had nothing to do with her status as a support mage, but with his attitude toward their classes. Mages rely only on facts, and Augustus protects what is truly important to him. August turned out to be even more religious than she expected. Ultimately, his loyalty makes him a great partner for Meyer. Meyer may not be as religious, but something about Augustus still draws him in. June decided she needed to find out more about the reasons for the connection between them.